What is happening, boys and girls? Jim here, RCAD, and it is after dark. Today is June 21st, 2022. It is Tuesday, right around 10:30 p.m. I don't know if we can see outside or not, but yeah, we can look outside. It is dark outside there. And we are working on the Traxxas slash VXL. Obviously, you've read the video title. You know exactly what's going on. We're getting ready to install a low center of gravity chassis kit onto this vehicle. We'll go into the reasons on that here in a second. We'll take a look at our low center of gravity chassis kit so we can get our part number out of the way and not being sponsored by anybody at all. Traxxas 7421 is our part number, and we have chassis conversion kit low center of gravity slash 4x4. And this is a charcoal gray color, which matches our stock Traxxas slash chassis. A lot of parts in here, new Nerf Bars, skid plate for the new Servo location, new transmission parts, all kinds of stuff in here. So a lot of parts in this bag. We're going to have a lot of stuff to change out. That's the moral of that story. All right, so the reason that we're doing this in our northern Michigan environment up here, where we're at currently, we have a lot of fine sand, like beach sand, and when it gets really dry, it kind of turns into a silt, almost like a baby powder of sorts. So very fine, and a lot of small pebbles as well. And we're having a lot of problems with pebbles and rocks and sand getting stuck underneath the drive shaft on this thing, or the center drive shaft, or center dog bone, whatever you guys want, guys or gals want to call it. This guy right here. Now, initially, this vehicle does come with a plastic cover that sits over top of this center drive shaft, and it sits recessed in here, and it covers this entire gap from front to back. Now, the only problem with that little cover, I said this during the unboxing video, is that there's an opening right up here in the front, right up here. There's a very small opening. You can see my finger on the back half, maybe back here, right down here. And that lets in dirt and debris no matter what you do. So if you have the cover on there, driving around in our environment, this would get filled up with dirt and sand, and we'd have really no way of getting it back out except for dumping it out that small hole there at the front. So as a preemptive strike, I removed that cover just to kind of save a little bit of a headache. But we're still getting all kinds of rocks and pebbles up in here, and they're getting stuck underneath the drive shaft, giving us all kinds of scratches and gouges and causing all kinds of noise and bind and all that other good stuff. So this is only the third battery that we ran through this vehicle, so a lot of rock rash on that drive shaft, considering that it's only the third battery that we had through the vehicle. So we're going to swap out to the low center of gravity chassis, which is going to raise that drive shaft up. There's probably several other reasons why or why not you'd want to switch out the chassis. I'm not too sure if it's going to affect how the vehicle hydroplanes, so I don't know about that. I know it only takes a certain mile per hour or a certain speed to hydroplane on water, but whether this chassis hydroplanes better than the low center of gravity chassis, I have no idea. I've never hydroplaned the Traxxas Slash. I know on the Traxxas Slash videos, at least on Traxxas's website or any of the advertisement videos, they don't show anybody hydroplaning with the low center of gravity chassis. They do show them hydroplaning with the regular VXL, so I'm not too sure if that's going to come into play if you plan on hydroplaning your Slash. Taking a look at a low center of gravity chassis kit, or low center of gravity chassis Slash, just as a comparison, so we can get an idea here. I did a little side-by-side comparison during the unboxing video, but regardless, here we go. Taking a look at our center drive shaft, center dog bone, whatever you want to call it. This is elevated through here because it's a low center of gravity chassis. The chassis sits down a little bit lower, battery sits down lower in the chassis, motor's in a different position, ESC's in a different position, steering servo's in a different position, receiver and whatnot is in a different position. So a lot of stuff that needs to get changed out once again. But we are going to be elevating that drive shaft by swapping out chassis, which is going to eliminate all that rock bind that we were getting previously. Another positive note is that our steering servo is going to be recessed underneath this little skid plate down here, which is just kind of a win-win in our environment for getting snagged on stuff and whatnot. Less chance of breaking anything on our steering mechanism down there. Looking at our stock chassis, sorry for being all over the map here, we can take a look at the way the steering setup is on this. Everything is kind of exposed. Yes, there is a little skid plate down here, a little cover or a guard, but these screws, if we look at our angles here, stick up just a little bit higher than that guard. So that is a snag point down there. You know, maybe I'm blowing things out of proportion. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks. But I know we'd be a lot happier to have all that stuff recessed in underneath the skid plate like it is on our low center of gravity chassis. So once again, the only reason that we're really swapping this stuff out is just so we can get our drive shaft up a little bit, elevate our drive shaft. That way we don't have to worry about rocks getting bound up inside there. So that's pretty much the only reason that we're doing this little mod today. All right, so let's get started. We're going to probably take the wheels off this thing first and foremost. I guess before we do that, we're going to crack this bag open and see what all our contents are and take a peek at our minimalistic instructions and see what all they have to say. All right, let's grab a knife here, crack this baby open, and see what she's all about. Kids, be careful with knives. If you're not a careful kid, have your parents open up the package for you. I'm not really a careful kid either, but I still managed to get it done without hurting myself. Yeah, it's a mess of parts. We have a transmission part right here, new motor mount sitting right there. So our motor's going to be getting put in a different position. Alright, what do we got here? Parts identifier. We've got some Nerf bars down in yonder there. We've got a front or rear transmission mount, possibly. I don't know. Just guessing. Here is our front steering skid plate right there. Lower steering skid plate. New steering linkage and servo horn right down there. What else do we have? We've got some screws, M3s, I'd imagine. New receiver box. Upper and lower silicone gasket, the whole 9 yards right there. Double-sided cushion tape for the bundle of wires coming in and out of the receiver. We have a new battery hold down, as well as some battery hold down brackets and some double-sided or some single-sided padded tape here. We got our single row sticky on one side and padding on the other. So there we go on that. And what else do we have here? Some other kind of mount. Marked H. This might be some kind of upper, yeah, I think it's the upper transmission mount is what it looks like to me. So there we go. There is the parts and our main chassis right here, which is all honeycombed on the inside for extra rigidity and support. Very nice. Stiffens the chassis a little bit, makes it a little bit stronger. Yeah, so there we go. There's a peek at our chassis. Alright, digging into our instructions. Blown up schematic. Nothing on the back. Yeah, let's take a peek at what we're looking at here. We've got our receiver box right there. Instructions on how to put all that together. Our servo horn. Little steering linkage right there. Front differential area. Our skid plate, lower skid plate mount. Showing padding installation right there for the battery tray. Our Nerf bars right there. Showing where they go. A moth right there. Our battery hold down, spur gear slash slipper clutch area there. Yep, rear transmission skid plate, that's what that was. Rear transmission. Battery hold downs. Transmission mount, motor mount, and yep, that is the upper transmission cover. For spur gear cover. Alright, well, that's all we get, boys and girls. That is all we get. And that is not much to see. I think we're going to start by just removing our electronics, getting all this stuff loose and ready to go and ready to take out of here. Then we're going to move over to the back half of the truck and start working on the back half and work our way forward from there. Once again, looking at our blow-up schematic, we see our chassis right here. Our slipper clutch right back here, or spur gear as well. Our rear differential, new rear differential skid plate. We're going to be reusing the front and rear bumpers off of the Slash VXL. So we're going to need to remove the bumpers as well. But I think we're going to start back here. We're going to take out the electronics first and get those out of the chassis and all loosened up. That way we can just make a quick transfer with the electronics from one vehicle to another as an entire package, essentially. And then we'll move on to the rear end and differential area here. Get our spur gear hooked up, get our drive shaft hooked up, get all that put into the new chassis. And then we'll kind of move our way forward and start working on the front half of the chassis. with the front differential and our new lower skid plate here that covers over our servo and our steering linkage. We'll get all this taken care of and attached, and then we'll move on from there. I believe the instructions pretty much want you to start with the Nerf bars on either side, but I think we're going to leave the Nerf bars for last, because that is probably one of the easiest thing to do. And yeah, I don't think we really need to touch that until last. Might as well have those things out of the way until the very end. I'm going to pull off the battery tray cover and get this out of the way. And before anybody asks, the original Slash chassis right here is already spoken for. Some new friends, John and Cole, that were out here on Memorial Day. Cole, the son, had damaged his Slash chassis somewhere along the lines and needs a new one. So we're going to donate this to Cole and give it to him. Alright, so working on the back half here. I think we'll start off by removing our servo horn for our steering. Right down here. We're going to get this guy removed real quick. Just take it right off the servo. We're going to be putting a new servo horn on this thing at some point in time. So we're just going to get this guy taken off of here. That way we can work around it. I'm going to put my finger behind it if I can. Try to stop this thing from turning when I put some torque on it. There we go. Now we're going to have to recenter the servo before we hook our steering back up to the new system. So keep that in mind. Before you hook up the new servo horn, we're going to have to hook up the electronics and recenter the servo. So I'm just going to pull the servo horn off of here, and I'm going to install the M3 screw back into the head of the servo. Loosely. Just enough to keep it held in there. There we go. So we've got that disconnected. Now we're going to be putting a whole new arm on here as well, because the kit did come with a whole new linkage, which is right here. So we're going to be installing this after the fact. But we're going to wait on that a few minutes. We don't need to get into that just yet, so we're just going to leave that attached. That way we can get our servo out of here. So right now we're going to go ahead and start removing the ESC and all our wires and all that other good nonsense and get that removed in the motor and what have you. And these are M3s as well. We've got an M3 right here, another one right here on either side of the ESC, one right here and one right here on either side of the receiver box, a couple right here for the hold downs on the receiver box, four for the steering servo, and another one over here for this little hold down bracket that holds our wires in place, or a wire keeper, or whatever you want to call that. So we're going to start loosening up those guys and working our way around. We're going to start with the wire hold down and get that out of the way. Stuck down pretty good. Alright, so we've got our hold down bracket and our screw for the hold down. I'm going to put that in a magnetic tool tray. And we'll put that off to the side. Just so we know where that came from. Moving on to the ESC. I've got those screws loose, but I'm just going to leave them in there. Same with the receiver box. I'm going to unscrew the receiver box and leave our screws kind of sitting in here until we're ready to pull this out. Got those loosened up. See, my camera's doing something goofy here. It's still recording. I have to check it here. I see my flash kick on and off one time. Alright, making sure we're still looking at what we're looking at here. I recently replaced my camera. Well, my apologies, boys and girls. We had a little camera snafu here. When my camera flash shut off and turned back on, I thought we had a problem with the camera. I turned around and looked at the camera. Everything was still good. I came back here, started working on the vehicle, removed all the stuff out of the vehicle, checked on the camera, and the camera was locked up. So we missed a whole bunch of stuff on camera here. So explaining about my camera, talking about the camera. Last year, around Christmas time, I got a 3-watt laser a little bit too close to my camera lens, fried my camera. I since replaced my phone, or my camera phone, with a brand new one, same model, same manufacturer. But the camera on this one acts up for some reason. Every once in a while it stops filming and just locks up solid. Usually it gives off a telltale sign, like the flash will turn on and off, and that's usually a sign that it stopped recording. And that's happened twice since that happened previously, a few seconds ago. So here we go. We've got our battery, we've got our wire hold down removed. So we took that off of the chassis. So there it is right there. We loosened up the screws for the ESC. So we've got that ready to come out of here. We removed the 2 screws that are holding down our receiver box cover. We're going to leave our receiver in here, or the receiver box. We're going to leave that inside this chassis just because this chassis is going to somebody else, and this kit comes with a whole new receiver box. So a whole new lower section, whole new upper section, gaskets, silicone grease, everything is in here. So we're not going to be reusing this receiver box. This can stay inside the vehicle. This chassis is going to somebody else. They can have the receiver box along with it. So we removed the 2 screws for the top of the receiver box. So we can pull the lid off the receiver box. We're going to set that off to the side. We're leaving the screws in it at the moment. Removed our other little wire hold down right here on the other half of the receiver box. 2 more M3s, so we got that cover removed. And we're going to set that off to the side. We have the screws sitting inside the magnetic tray. Moving on to the antenna tube, this guy right here. It has a small grub screw right down here in the corner. So you need to remove that grub screw before you pull that antenna tube out of here. I already have that grub screw removed, so we can pull that tube out of here. Just like that. We're going to remove the antenna from the tube itself. Put our tube off to the side. We're going to reuse that. The antenna. Be very careful with your antenna. Do not damage this. Do not trim this. Do not cut this. That needs to be its full length. So we're going to guide that back through our receiver box right here. And gently pull it through the box and back out the other side, just like that. Our steering servo and our ESC need to be unplugged from the receiver itself. One is being plugged into here to steering, and the other one is being plugged into, I think it was channel 2 on the other side over here. So pay attention to where your stuff is plugged in. That way you can make sure to put it back in the right spot. And once you have that stuff unplugged, very gently guide those wires back out. As far as paying attention to where those plugs are plugged in, I recommend if you have a cell phone, take a picture of it. Just so you know beforehand, before you unplug it, where everything went to. If you're not aware of RCs and what goes where. So we've got our ESC unplugged. We have our steering servo unplugged. We're fishing those wires out of here as carefully as possible. We removed the 4 screws that are holding our steering servo down so we can pull our steering servo right up and out of here, and we're going to set that off to the side. Our ESC, we're going to pull this guy out of here. We're just going to disconnect our 3 motor wires, our white wire, yellow wire, and the blue wire. They pull apart pretty easy. And then we're going to take our ESC, and we're going to set that off to the side. This one does have a hot racing electric fan on it. I've heard different stories about the hot racing fans, good stories, bad stories. We've had this one on here for 3 batteries so far, and no problems as of yet. Still works, blades are intact, seems to be okay so far. Same thing with the hot racing fan on my Losi 10. Alright, moving on to the receiver itself. We're going to have to pop this receiver out of the receiver box, and I'm pretty sure it's probably stuck in here with some double-sided adhesive, double-sided tape. So I'm going to try to pop it out with my thumb if I can. And it's not really moving, so I think we're going to need a small flat blade screwdriver to get underneath that receiver box and gently pry it up. Excuse me for being all over the map. But when your camera stops recording and starts recording periodically, that tends to make life a little bit difficult. Kind of throws you off balance when it comes to doing a video such as this. because you never know when the camera's moving or not moving. I tell you what, this ESC or receiver is stuck in here pretty darn good. Traxxas definitely wasn't intending on you removing this. That is for sure. There we go. Putting the screwdriver underneath the receiver and then twisting upwards gently like that. I eventually got it pop loose. So we got our receiver out of there. Thank goodness for that. All right, looking at our receiver. Many channels on this guy. Lots of channels. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to where everything was plugged into when you unplug it. That way you can get everything plugged back into the right spot. Another link over here on the side for the Traxxas link or the complete BEC kit, either or. There we go. We got some double-sided tape on the back half. We're going to have to get all this stuff peeled off of here before we install it into the new receiver box. But for the time being, we're just going to set that off to the side so it's out of the way. Looking at our camera. Okay, we're still recording, so we're looking good. So there's our receiver box, all cleaned out, good to go. We're going to go ahead and put our parts back on the receiver box since that is staying inside the vehicle. That's not going anywhere. We're going to leave that for Cole. Alright, so we've got a receiver box installed, cover that goes over top of that center drive shaft. Right now would be a good time to start working on removing that, which is one screw right here in M3. There's another M3 right back here. That's a pretty tight fit with that skid plate or that cover underneath the motor back here. So you might have a little bit of a time fishing it out of there. Probably be easier to get the motor removed before you actually remove that, but I was able to remove it without taking out the motor, so there you go. Our ESC is removed, our receiver is removed, everything's taken out of there. We got our electronics done. We're going to move around to the back half of the vehicle, and we're going to start removing our back bumper and get that out of the way. And then we'll loosen up our two shocks right up here. I'm pretty sure we don't necessarily have to take our tires off. I think we can do this project without taking the tires off. Making sure my camera's still recording. I need to put a mirror on the back half of my camera so I can see what's going on the screen, so I know whether it's recording or not. All right, so let's get started on removing our rear bumper. Once again, we're going to be reusing our front bumper and our rear bumper. So I want to make sure that we keep that stuff in somewhat good condition. So getting ready to remove the rear bumper. We've got two screws, bam, bam, right there. One more screw right here in the middle at the back. Now we got two more screws to pull out right down here. These two M3s going into the rear differential area. And that should remove our rear bumper. And it's also going to give us access to the hinge pins going through the lower control arms down here. So we're going to have to pull that stuff off as well. Just because we're going to be bolting that up to a new skid plate. So we'll go ahead and remove these two M3 screws right here on the back. Get those taken out. They are pretty darn long. That's a pretty hefty screw. I'm going to put that at the very back of my tool tray so that I know that it came off at the very back of the truck. Kind of placing the screws in the tool tray in the position of where they were sitting on the vehicle, since our instructions are pretty darn vague. Pretty darn vague for the Traxxas instructions. Not a lot of detail there. Not a lot of written words there as far as screw sizes and things of that nature go. We got those two screws removed. We're going to go to this one right back here at the very back of the truck. This guy right back here. All the same size. So we got all three of those screws lined up in the back of the tool tray. It's going to flip the truck upside down right here, and obviously, unfortunately, you won't be able to see what's really happening back here. sure we're still recording. Yes, we are. Really makes doing a video difficult, I tell you what. When you don't trust your camera. Once again, putting these screws with the others. This one's got a little bit of dirt in it. I need to dig that dirt out of the hole before we try to unscrew it. Alright, we got those two guys removed. These guys have a slight taper on them. Up towards the head, we have a slight taper there for recessing the screw. And that goes on the bottom. So we can take our rear bumper off of there. And we're going to make sure to wipe all the dirt off of this stuff and get all this stuff cleaned up as much as possible before reinstalling it. That way, everything lines up as good as it can possibly line up. Bunch of dirt up in here. Nasty. Alright. Looking at the back, we've got a little keeper back here that's holding our pins in place for the lower control arms. So we're going to remove that aluminum keeper / guide, making sure that we know what direction it came off of in. I'm not too sure if it's a universal fit. But I pulled it off this way, and I'm going to set it down face down in my tool tray. So we can remove these pins if we wanted to at this point in time, but we're going to leave those in there just so all this stuff stays intact. And we'll go ahead here and remove our rear shocks. I think at this point in time, I'm just going to remove the shocks from the upper mount right up here on either side and get these guys loosened up and just hanging off to the side. Let them flop around. Don't necessarily care about that. I'm going to reinstall the screws back into the bracket just to kind of take the pressure off of the control arms. You can probably leave them hooked up, but once you get these lower pins taken out, the pressure that's on our shocks is probably going to drop these down and make it a pain in the butt to get these reinstalled. So if we take the shocks off of the shock tower at the top, that'll give us a little bit more leeway and ease for putting things back together. Appears to be a washer or something behind this one, so being careful as I remove it. Yep, there was a washer behind it. Right there, small washer. I'll put all this back on and run the screw back into the hole right where it was at, so I know right where it came from. Right in the center hole on the shock mount. And that's where that one was sitting at. So one shock has been removed and is kind of laying there, flopping around on the side. Alright, we got the tension eased off on the other shock. Try to do this without dropping this washer, but it's probably going to be impossible. There we go. That one's removed. We got our washer, putting the washer back onto the screw. And we're going to reinstall that right back into the hole that it came from. And there we go. We have both rear shocks loosely detached. Are we still recording? Yes, we are. Okay. Moving along. Now we need to remove all these screws across the back of here for this top cover on the spur gear area, because we're going to be putting a whole new cover on here, new motor plate on here as well. All this stuff's got to come off, so all of this stuff needs to get removed. And let's start removing some stuff here. Starting with the one top center here, front and center. Getting this guy removed. Make sure to put that in a spot where it'll know where it's at. Move over to the far left side. Moving this screw down here on the far left or far right, whatever way you're looking at it. Setting that one off to the side. It's slightly longer than the previous screw that we just pulled out of there, so I'm trying to keep our screws separated so we know exactly where they came from. Going over here to the opposite side, right down here in this corner. Get this guy out of here. That is the same length as the one that was on the right. Screw removed. We got our center screw removed. We have the far right side screw removed. We've got another screw down here, which is part of the hold down bracket for the battery. So I'm not too sure if that needs to come out or not. We do need to remove the motor regardless, so we're going to have to take this out of here at some point in time. We still have two fatter screws here to remove, but that is for the rear differential itself. So maybe we'll go ahead here and start separating some of that stuff. Or maybe we'll pull the motor out. I am not too sure here. So I'm going to swap out the heads on the driver and go ahead and pull out this fat chrome motor screw right here. So removing the fat motor plate screw. Big fat chrome guy here. We're backing that one out. And that does have a lock nut on the inside, which is wedged in. Right down here, there's a lock nut wedged into this bracket. So make sure that you don't lose that when you flip the truck around and turn it upside down. Okay, we got that guy removed. Putting that with the other motor screws. So we've got the motor out. And we're going to have to replace this plate right back here, I believe, as well. Yes, we will. We've got a brand new one right there. Different style. So we're going to have to replace this as well. Keep that in mind. So we're going to put our motor off to the side and get that out of the way. We're going to go ahead here and remove our other two screws, I believe, right here on either side. These two fatter screws right there, which go into the top of the rear differential area. We'll go ahead and get those guys removed, as well as removing these two M3s down here, which are holding the rest of the differential onto this skid plate area. So which ones you want to remove first is up to you. I think I'm going to go ahead and remove those two small ones off the bottom first, and then we'll move around to the top. We'll go ahead and pull out these two guys right down here on either side and get them out of the way as soon as we swap out our heads on a wrench. Yeah, not very organized, I apologize. Only other things that I've done to a Slash is install electric fans. This differential is going to start getting real loose once we start getting these screws out of here. So things are going to start wanting to fall apart here. Still being held in at the top with two heavier screws. Putting these back here with the other rear diff screws so we don't get those lost. Since they are essentially the same length, same size, going in the same area. Alright, we got those two guys out. Alright, swapping them back out to our fatter head driver. These two screws on top removed. As far as the shock tower, I'm not too sure if we're going to have to remove that shock tower or not. They kind of show it sitting on top of the differential, so we're just going to leave it intact at the moment and go from there. One of our fatter screws pulled out. That's a hefty lugger right there. We're going to put that off to the side. Screw number 2 has been removed. Are we still recording? Yes, we are. Okay. Makes that really inconvenient with the whole phone shutting off on its own thing. Alright, so we got that removed. Let's take our pins out at this point in time. We're going to pull out our 2 little cross pins down here. If I can find what I did with my pliers. Where they got put to. There they go. Very organized. And our pins removed. There we go. Alright, now we should be able to kind of separate our lower arms, control arms. I'm going to try to keep this stuff together. It might want to fall apart on you. But I'm going to try to hold it all together as much as possible. Probably be a lot easier pulling your tires off and everything else, but we'll see how this goes. We need to remove these guys down here as well. I'm sure somebody else has probably done a slash chassis conversion kit who's probably done 2 or 3 of these, and I'm sure he has a much better video on the entire process. But whatever, it's a learning curve here, so we're learning as we go. Putting my thumb on this to kind of hold this together as we remove these screws, just to make sure we're not being surprised with a bunch of parts falling at us at the same time or all at once. Get that guy pulled out. Set it with the others. Removed. Well, this should be getting a whole lot looser back here. There we go. We slid our rear portion off. So here's our rear differential area. This little cover is getting taken off of here. We're going to have a new skid plate that goes on, and that goes into our drive shaft area. So we'll go ahead here and pop this cover off of here, which I think we should be able to just pull this right on down. There we go. We've got that removed, and that is no longer being used. At this point in time, we've got a real good look at our rear differential under there. Look at that. So you might want to gingerly or carefully remove any dust and debris around this before you reinstall it onto the new part. We'll get a rag and we'll wipe this guy off real quick before we install it onto the new bracket. Alright. Holding it upside down so the dirt falls straight down. I'm just going to carefully give this a little wipe. Try to get that stuff off of there as much as possible without contaminating our rear differential area. As much as possible, I say. It's about as good as it's going to get. Alright, so we got our rear end removed. There is our spur gear right down here. And the rest of our transmission, which is still sitting inside the chassis, which we need to get out of here. Sure if we can just lift this right out of here. Should be able to. There we go. We got our top cover off. We've got that removed. We're going to put a new cover on, a different style. So no worries about that. There we go. A little bit of pressure on that and it's popping off. Okay, well, there we go. Pulling out the whole drive shaft and everything. I'm going to try to hold the drive shaft and see if I can keep the drive shaft at the front. There we go. Pull this off the back. So we got our rear spur gear slash slipper clutch slash drive shaft input right there for the center drive shaft. And we'll set this guy off to the side as well. We're going to put that right inside the new chassis to keep it clean. Flip this guy around, go ahead here and pull our drive shaft out of there, which is extremely damaged, and we'll set that off to the side as well. And I believe we could probably just leave this part inside the truck, this other portion right down here, because we're going to be adding a new section onto this, I believe. I think we have a new part for that. Let's take a peek and make sure. We got our top cover right here, which is H. That's our top cover. We've got our bottom rear differential mount right there. So we've got that with the hardware as well. We do have screws in there. That's nice. Alright, so this is our new lower transmission mount right there. And our motor plate once again. So we can leave this part in here. That can stay there. So we'll leave this in here. We'll put whatever hardware was holding that back down back in there. That way Cole has everything that he needs for this truck, with no worries about missing any parts. So there we go. All that stuff is put back into place. We'll go ahead here and get our original battery hold down bracket put back into place, because we don't need that. We're not going to be needing that. And the new owner of the chassis probably will. So we'll go ahead here and put this back in place for them, along with the hairpin, cross pin, hold down pin, whatever. There we go. So we've got all that back in place. Rear end has been taken off of the car, and we can go ahead here and start mounting this stuff up onto our new chassis. We're going to hold off on the front differential at the moment. We're going to leave this section B for right now, and we'll start reattaching our rear portion onto the chassis and kind of go from there. Put this portion of the chassis off to the side, and we'll start attaching new parts onto the new chassis. This guy right here. And there is what we're going to be starting off with. Alright, we have our rear end put off to the side, our rear differential put off to the side. When you reassemble this, it might be a good time to put a little extra grease in there. We'll do that once we start reassembling things. We're going to start with our motor plate and our bracket right here for the spur gear area, and we'll get that installed first. So we'll take a knife and get this guy opened up. Kids, be careful with knives. Once again, if you're not a careful kid, have your parents open things up for you. Really, if you're not a careful kid, you probably shouldn't be doing a project like this to begin with. Alright, so here's our new motor plate right there. We're going to set that into our, well, we'll put that in our chassis, I guess, and get it out of the way. Get our bracket out right here, and the included hardware as well. I'm just going to dump this into my hand so I can keep this stuff separate. I'm going to put this included hardware right on our instructions right over here, which you're probably not going to be able to see, but there they are. So we've got our hardware sitting in place. We'll get our rear differential plate put in place as well. And we want to have it like this, with our ears facing backwards towards the back of the chassis from what I can see on the instructions. So we'll go ahead here and get this slid into place. Slipping this down inside the chassis, just like so. We can see our one screw hole right down here on the bottom, hopefully. Two more hold down points right there. This is where our lock nut's going to get slipped in place. And our two attachment points right down here, which go on with our rear skid plate. So several attachment points there. Moving that motor plate again. Alright, let's see here. What do we got going on for our hardware? Looking at our hardware, looking at our fat screws, looking at our skinny screws. Screws. Flash just shut off, so that's bad news. It means the camera's going to quit working on me. We get our lock nut put in place right up here. We're going to slide that guy in very carefully, just like that, and get that set in place. We're going to reuse that one long screw that we pulled out of there. Nice shiny one right there, that hold down screw. We're going to reuse that. Instructions aren't very clear. Looking where our screws are located and what screws we are using to go where. Well, we got these 4 screws on top going in, so our 4 included screws that were in the hardware bag appear to all go through the top here for hold down screws. So we were going one here, one down in this corner, and one down in this corner over here, with the 4 included screws that were in that bag. So we'll go ahead and get those guys installed, starting off with the bottom right corner. Get that started. I'm not going to tighten all these down until I get them all in place, just in case we need a little bit of wiggle room. wiggle room. Need to kind of hold this in and over to the left a little bit, or right a little bit. Get this screw to line up. Which is not really wanting to line up. Talking about wiggle room. Okay. So I had to put my finger behind it right over here and kind of pull this down to one side a little bit to get that screw to drop into the hole. Are we still recording? Yes, we are. Okay, we're good. Darn camera, I tell you what. Don't over tighten your screws, just kind of screw them down until they stop and then give them a little snug after that. Just don't strip it out. Don't go too crazy with it. Screwing in the plastic. Sometimes running screws in at a certain angle can be difficult, and it's a little bit easier if you turn it sideways. Not so easy if you're trying to do this on camera. You can't exactly see what's happening now, can you? Alright, that guy's tight. Go to the opposite corner. Alright, that one's good. Up to the top. That one's good. Opposite top. Alright, we're all set. We've got our plate installed. 1, 2, 3, and 4 on our screws. And that is sitting right where it needs to be sitting. Alright, the next step. Make sure our camera is still recording. Yes, we are. Okay, we're good. Looking at the instructions, which once again are extremely vague. We just installed our motor plate, which is this guy right here, into this position down here. Technically, we probably could install our battery hold-down cover at this point in time, but I think we're going to wait on that until after we get our rear differential and spur gear and all this other stuff put in place. So we're going to attach our rear differential and spur gear and all that other good nonsense back up to our new skid plate and get all that hooked back up. So we've got our spur gear slash slipper clutch slash center drive shaft, and we'll get this whole unit slid back into place. Bearing still sitting on top of our slipper adjuster, going right into this point right back here. So we'll go ahead here and get that put right back into place just like that. Alright, let's open up our next parts bag, which is our rear differential holder. And our flash just kicked on and off again. That is not a good sign. Opening up our next parts bag, which is our rear diff skid plate area. Rear differential holder slash lower control arm bracket slash whatever. And we'll get our other hardware out of here as well. There are 4 more fatter screws. So we have 2 screws that are 1 length and 2 other screws that are slightly longer on our 4 screws on the back there. Taking a peek at our instructions real quick, real brief like, so I can find out what screws go where on our 4 here. Need a set of reading glasses to read these. Reading glasses. Yeah, it's fun getting old, I tell you what. Excuse me for 1 second here as I read our instructions as to where these 4 screws go. 4x14 is showing on 1 set of screws. Uh, 4x12. Okay. So our shorter screws right here, these are the 12mm screws, a 4mm by 12mm. These 2 go on the top, coming back down. And our 4mm by 14mm, the 2 longer screws, are going in the bottom, coming back up. Sometimes you need some reading glasses so you can read the darn instructions. So our rear differential skid plate is going to get bolted on just like this. And we need to have our rear diff attached to this before we get this all attached. So we'll go ahead here and put a little bit of extra grease in here on our rear differential just to make sure that that is greased up and good to go. Oh, what kind of grease are you using, Jim? Well, I'm using some TLR, T and Low C Racing high pressure black grease. That is what I'm using on this guy. Add a little bit of Low C to the slash. I'll just put a little dab on here every once in a while on a couple of these teeth. Spinning one tire, give that differential a rotation. Don't want to go too crazy with grease, you know. Too much grease can cause bind. Cause things to bind up, believe it or not. So you don't want to go too crazy with your grease. I'm just putting some every so often across this ring gear on the back of the differential. Putting a little blob here and there. Letting the pinion gear on the diff take it around the differential. And I believe it's good to go. So we got that taken care of. We can go ahead and get this attached to our rear skid plate. Making sure that we put this in the right direction with our shock towers and everything else all going in the right direction. Our little teeth and fatter side is going to be facing the back of the chassis, so that's going in. Our opening right here, our opening down here is for the pinion shaft, so that goes in as well. So where this goes on just like this. Just like so. All these little tabs need to snap over this edge right here. Just like that. And that helps out tremendously. Okay, so we've got that kind of put on there. Hard to see, eh? Okay, so we got our rear skid plate attached. Pinion opening facing forward, fat part facing forward, shock mounts facing forward. We've got that pretty much good to go. Now, according to this, we should be able to slide this on into the chassis. They show the slipper gear and all that other nonsense going on along with it. Hopefully we're still recording. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Okay. We're good on that aspect. We can hook up our A-arms, or lower control arms after the fact, after we get this slapped on here. So I'm just kind of hoping that we can slide this in without having any interruptions. So attempting to mate these two halves together. Slipper clutch and differential. There we go. Give it a little spin, get everything to line back up. We've got our rear diff kind of roughly sitting in place. We're going to take our longer M4s and put them up through the bottom, and our shorter M4s up through the top. Since we're up here on the top right now, we might as well get our shorter M4s and get those started on the top half. Make sure we got everything all lined up here. Excuse my hand for being in the way. I'm kind of pinching this together. Just getting one started. Getting our other one started. Once again, just getting them started until I get them going all the way around. How many minutes are we at? 17:39. And we're still recording, so that's good. Our camera has not shut off on us this time. Flip this baby over. Get the two screws in on the bottom. Our two fat guys that are kind of holding things together. Get these started if we can. There we go. There's one. Screw number two. We'll start putting that into where it needs to go. Get this one put in. And I'm just going to drive these guys home. Making sure that's snug. And this one as well. And moving on to the top, and getting these two guys put in place. A little bit tough to thread in there. Getting these guys snug down. Turning with my left hand, and I am right-handed. Putting our screws in with the left hand, and I'm right-handed once again. So part of the joys of doing this on film, so you all can see what's going on. Making sure that that's snug, not going crazy with anything. Making sure that that's snug. Flipping everything back over here, make sure our bottom ones are snugged up good here. That's good. And that's good as well. Okay, so there we go. Our new bracket has been mounted onto the chassis. So we can go ahead right now, and our camera flash just flipped on and off, so I don't know if we're still recording or not. Alright, so we got everything all attached. We'll go ahead here and get our lower control arms put back into place and get our shocks put back where they need to go. Making sure our shocks are facing the right direction, get them up into position. We'll get our control arms kind of put back into place, and we'll slide our pins back through and get these guys sitting where they need to be. So there's no worries about them flopping around anymore. There's one. Another pin kind of primed up and ready to go. Get our shock into position, flip it around. Make sure it's facing the right spot. Get our control arm back into its slot. Right there. Probably could have left those shocks attached, but I didn't want to fight the shock pressure as we were putting those pins back into place. So sometimes it's just easier keeping things loose so you don't have to fight that excess pressure. Get these guys slid into place. There we go. We'll take our little hold down bracket. Once again, I laid that face down in my tool tray so I knew which way it went on the way back in. Pushing it on there. We need that hold down screw back in the middle again, which is part of our rear bumper bracket attachment. I think we can go ahead and get our rear bumper put back on, because that holds all this together with our other keepers on the back. So putting this back into place, making sure it slides in between our two brackets up there, making sure everything kind of lines back up down here. Yep, we're good to go. Get this put back into position just like that. We'll get our two screws put in for those guys, our other two screws for these guys, and our rear portion of the vehicle will be pretty much done at that point in time, once we get our shocks reattached, of course. And we'll start running our skid plate screws back in. Two smaller ones and two longer ones. We're going to take our two shorter ones and run them in here on the front, back into the differential area, right up here. We'll get these put back into place. My apologies if you can't see what's happening. Make sure I get both the same screws going in the same location. Alright, so I'm going to hold this sideways here. I apologize if you guys can't see what's going on camera. I'm trying to turn this in with my right hand. I got a mosquito buzzing around me at the same time. Distractions, I tell you, distractions. Yeah, I'm going to have to switch back to the old left hand here for this one. Hold our bumper back in place. Got a mosquito flying around here, Cole. Tell your dad we got mosquitoes. Need to get sprayed again. We get our property in the course area on the adventure course sprayed for mosquitoes. Every few weeks it gets sprayed. Alright, so we got those two put in place. We'll go ahead here and get our two lower ones put back into place. getting started. Hopefully we're catching this on camera. Hopefully the camera's still recording, or else this would be extremely frustrating. I have to stop and look. Okay, we're still recording. Okay. Having a faulty camera, man, that is a real problem if you do videos like this. I think it's time that I step things up to a GoPro or something else along those lines instead of using a cell phone for recording video. Cell phone works great, but sometimes it's better off just having a dedicated camera. Something that's just straight made for videoing only. And not meant for making calls and texts and Facebooking and YouTubing and all that other nonsense in between. Video gaming, of course. Didn't run that one all the way home, just kind of ran it into the plastic. Making sure we get our other one lined up and into the plastic right. There we go. These are good. Start snugging this one down. Trying not to strip out any screws. Just making sure that we have them all put in place and where they need to be. Okay, I think we're pretty much good with that. Again, tighter, we're going to pull those screws right on through the hole. We still need to put our upper screws in up here, right, these two guys right up here. So we'll get those guys put back into place and move on from there. Alright, getting our upper screws put back in place. We got two big long buggers in here to put back through those guys. We'll get those lined up and ready to go. 1 and 2 right there, and a third one to go through the middle. Getting these guys reattached. Left-handed, once again. I don't use power tools for any of this stuff, a power screwdriver, cordless screwdriver. Sometimes I'll use one for taking stuff apart if I'm not doing it on camera. But I never use them for putting things back together. It's just way too easy to strip out a screw. I'd rather do all the installs and things of that nature by hand. If I'm stripping a vehicle down for parts, I'll use a cordless screwdriver from start to finish. That way everything goes fast. Alright, we'll take our other long M3 and install it back into the back half of the bumper. Right there. And we'll run this baby home. Left-handed. Alright, we got that guy back in and tightened down. Bumper's all reattached, rear end is put in place. Just have to reattach our shocks and we're pretty much done on the back portion of it. Start with this far side shock first, which you guys and gals probably can't see. Remembering that washer goes on the back right in between the shock and the shock mount. So put the screw through the shock, put the washer on the other end, just like that, and then reinstall that back into the mount. And these were taken out of the center hole, so we're putting them back into the center hole just so we know that we have everything right where we started from. So putting it back into the center adjustment slot. sure that our shock is going through the hoop or the eyelet so we don't jam nothing up. It's on there. Other one removed. Washer in one hand, running the screw through, slipping the washer back on. Lifting up the bottom of the control arm with my other finger and getting the screw started. Making sure that we're getting that put in there nice and straight. Putting the shock over top of the collar on the screw, kind of holding it there with my thumb. Just make sure we're not pinching nothing. And driving that baby home. Don't go too crazy, you're screwing into plastic. Alright, so there we go. Our rear end is all attached, rear differential area. Hold one tire, we can get our stuff to spin around. Good to go. Everything's clean and neat and officially swapped over. Alright, let's go ahead here and get our motor put into place. And our motor plate and all that other good stuff. So we need to remove this motor plate off of here and install our new motor plate onto it. And try to get all this good stuff to line back up again. Let's dig into our motor plate, which we have laying out already somewhere around here. There we go, there she is. This did come with a bag of hardware, a bag of new screws sitting right here. We're still using old screws currently. Making sure that we're going to put all this nonsense back on in the same position that we took it off in. Holding the motor in one hand, I'm kind of looking at the instructions here and trying to see where we're at with the motor plate and all that crap. I'm assuming it's going to be sitting relatively in the same kind of position as far as things go. We want the taper on the inside. I imagine it's going to be sitting just like this, but I could be wrong. And Traxxas is pretty vague on their instructions with that. Okay, they are showing that plate facing down. Okay, well, Traxxas shows this plate right here sitting like this in here. Sitting like this. So that's how it's going to be sitting inside the chassis. So when we install this onto the motor, we're basically taking it from this position right here where our two screws are on top of each other, and we're kind of moving it to this position right here. So entirely different plate right there, and everything is sitting in an entirely different position with the motor and all that good nonsense. Trying to pay attention that we keep our wires and all that stuff facing in a way that's going to be copacetic for sitting inside our chassis there. So I'm going to go ahead here and pop these loose. I'm sure they're Loctited in. Traxxas is usually good for putting a little bit of blue Loctite on their stuff. On the thread just to make sure that it doesn't back out on you. Okay, we got that removed. Loosened. Yeah, a little bit of blue Loctite on the thread if we can focus in on it right there. It's already pre-applied. And our hex screw is stuck inside the driver. Ran the screw in just a little bit more so I could pull it out from the driver itself. Setting that upside down on my tool tray. Getting our other screw removed. And removing our motor plate. A little bit of dirt and debris on the back half of the motor back here, so I'm going to wipe all that nonsense off. Because we want to be sitting nice and flush with nothing in between anything. Don't want any dirt in there to stop things from lining up correctly. Getting that wiped off. Looking good. And then figuring out our new position here for our plate. and where we want the motor sitting. All right, so I'm going to take this right now and kind of set our plate in place so I know where it sits in accordance with everything else. Just like that. Looking inside our chassis right down here. We have this little notch on the front of the plate. Square part down here, notch on the front. Notch fits over this screw head right here. Just like that. And it drops into place like so. So that's how it's going to be sitting on here. So I want to make sure that we have our motor sitting in a position where our wires are going to be friendly. And not hitting on anything. And not getting in the way of anything. So right now, actually, I'm going to refer to our Traxxas / Ultimate Edition real quick and look at how its motor is sitting in there and what position it's sitting in there, and we'll go right off of that. It's like cheating. This is the nice part about having an Ultimate Edition laying around. You can use it for reference. Ultimate Edition. All right, looking at this guy, where they have the motor wires right here, kind of sitting at about 11 o'clock on the motor. So using that as a reference as to where we're going to put this one in at, I'm going to leave it sitting somewhat 11 o'clock like this one is, and try to position it out like that. Nice to have another one on hand that you can use for a reference. All else fails. Alright, so looking at that, seeing how it's going to sit in there, looking at our motor, how it's going to go in here, I'm going to pull our motor plate back out of here while I'm holding onto the motor. I'm going to take our motor plate and assume that it's going to go right about here. Right in this area. So motor, wires, plate, holder, ear on the bottom. Putting it just like that. So our little notch up here is almost kind of kitty corner with our wires. Hard to explain. Sort of like this. Just like that. That's how I'm attaching it. Let's get this guy attached and then we'll see what it looks like after it's all back together again. And it'll be a little bit easier to judge what it looks like. One screw going in. Sorry if you guys and gals can't see what's going on here. Try to hold things up here so you can. Run these babies back home. Making sure that they're both kind of set in position before we tighten them up. We want those recessed, those tapered edges sitting in those recesses nicely before we start snugging up one or the other, just to make sure that everything is going to be cool and line up good. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of oomph on these guys, just to make sure that they aren't going to back out. Don't go too crazy. Strip out ahead, you're going to have a heck of a time getting these undone. So there we go. Motor is on. We can see our plate in correlation with the wires, how that's sitting. Kind of just to the left of the wires, right there. And that should work out okay. Looking at our pinion gear, trying to figure out what our pinion gear is currently. What do we got on here? I can't even tell. Let's look on camera. What kind of a pinion gear we got on here? What size is that? It is a 13, it looks like. 13 tooth pinion gear. That's pretty small. It is pretty darn small. Now would actually be a good opportunity to change the pinion gear if you wanted to do that. But I think we're just going to leave that 13 on there. It's my niece's car. She's still getting used to it. She doesn't need to go any faster than it's already going on 3S. So we'll leave that 13 tooth pinion gear on there. We'll go ahead here and get this one installed. Holding it down to one side to make sure that we aren't hitting our spur gear at the same time. Dropping our motor in so our little ear wraps around that eyelet on the screw. And everything drops into place. So our motor is sitting in position. Spur gear lining up with the pinion gear. And we need to come in here and do some adjusting with this, with our gear lash, before we put that cover on. So we're going to get our long chrome screw put into place. We'll get our gear lash adjusted and then go from there. This is our long chromie that we pulled out of there. Our long chrome homie, and we will put that one back in place. Get it started at least where it needs to go, into the lock nut that was dropped into the bracket right up here. Alright, so we got that guy started. Switch out the heads on our driver to Mr. Fathead. Once again, not going crazy here, just going to kind of get this close to where it needs to be. That way we can still adjust our motor from left to right. I just don't want this to wiggle around a little bit while we're doing it. Okay. So I ran that M4 back into the plate, leaving it somewhat loose once again, so we can adjust our gear lash on the pinion gear down here. Hopefully we're catching that on camera. Adjusting the gear lash on your pinion gear. Well, you know, the best thing to do is use a little piece of paper in between the 2 points. And, you know, it's tough to judge on the thickness of paper to use for this kind of stuff. Different gears, different pitches, mod 1s, 48 pitch, 64 pitch, 32 pitch, whatever pitches you're using, different mods. I mean, there's not more than just mod 1. There's mod 1, mod 5, mod 6, mod whatever. All kinds of different pitches to go with. As far as using a piece of paper for adjusting the gear lash and the thickness of the paper in particular, this is what I do. Now, I'm a smoker, and I'm not proud of that. I do not endorse smoking. I'm not for smoking. But I use the piece of paper off the top of a pack of cigarettes. This stuff right here works out perfect for adjusting gear lash. And I'll just rip that paper out of there and use that paper for adjusting the gear lash. It's like the perfect thickness for it. Works out great. So we're going to take a piece of this paper and we're going to wedge it in between our pinion gear and our spur gear down here. And get that kind of sitting right in between those 2 points. We have to make this a little bit thinner. That way we can fit it into that small gap. Just about like that. And move our motor off to the side. Work this piece of paper down in here. Just like so, making sure that it's far down in there. Pushing that gear into the paper, just like so, and kind of holding it snugly with one hand while spinning the gear with the other a little bit, just to make sure everything is good. And I'm going to snug this up while putting pressure on here. Not putting on too much pressure, just keeping it so we can hold that pitch or hold that gap. Don't want to go too crazy. Don't want to have too much pressure down on that. We're going to snug this guy up pretty good. We have a lock nut on the back side once again. Don't want to spin the lock nut. We just spun it a little bit one turn. So I guess we're plenty tight enough. And then we're just going to work that paper back out of there by turning our gear. And we should have a pretty good lash right there with that. Giving it a few more spins here, just making sure that everything is lined up good. Pinion gear is lined up good with the spur. Or the slipper clutch, however you want to refer to it as. But it almost seems kind of tight to me. Like it might be a little bit too close. Seems kind of noisy. I think we're going to loosen that up a little bit and back it off just a pinch. Getting this stuff adjusted right is key when you're doing this stuff. Sometimes you can have it too tight, that lash, and that will create a lot of noise. So you don't want that. So loosening that back up, we're going to take that piece of paper and stick it back in there again. And try this one more time. got her kind of held in place like so. Going to ease up on the pressure just a little bit so I'm not putting as much inward pressure on that. Making sure to crush the paper, that the paper's crushed. And we just spun the nut again, so I'd imagine it's probably pretty tight. We'll spin our paper out. And that sounds a little bit better. Sounds a little bit better to me, so I think we're going to run it right about there. Alright, let's work on our cover for that area. We'll find the cover, which is right here, bag H. We'll get that baby cracked open using a X-Acto knife. Get our screws out of there. I'm going to drop our screws right into the battery tray so we're not going to lose those guys. We have a new wire hold down in here as well. Wire hold down bracket. Keep our motor wires in check. Here's our new motor wire hold down bracket right there. And our new transmission, spur gear, dust cover, or whatever cover you want to call that. Alright, so we're going to get this guy installed. Take our screws back out of the battery tray. Looking at our spur gear area, cover in hand. Long part here facing down over onto the passenger side. Little screw tab here facing backwards. And we're going to get this guy slipped into place. Hopefully we can get this guy slipped into place. Alright, so we've got that on. All we need to do is run our screw back into the top and get that held in place. And I think that is the only other screw that's holding that down. It's that one right there. And that, I believe, is this little M3. If I'm not mistaken. We're going to have to put on the reading glasses so we can redetermine all this crap. Yes, that is the smaller M3. So this little guy right here, this little rinky-dink M3, is the one that we're using. Got two M3s in this package, one for the hold down and one for this bracket here. And as soon as I find my driver, we'll be all set. Shorter M3 right there, okay. And we just need an M3 driver. Alright, so there we go, we got everything all together. And we're going to put that right back into this hole right here on top. Maybe easier said than done. So there we go. Snugging things down. Don't go crazy with this one. It's just holding this plastic cover on. So there we go. Just snugging that in place. So that is all set. Last little thing that we need to do is that our motor hold down wires, but we'll do that afterwards. The little hold down bracket. Our hold down bracket is going to go right here in between our Nerf bar mount on its top. Right there, that one hole right there. So we're going to wait on that hold down bracket until we do the Nerf bars. In the meantime, though, in between time, I'm going to take that hold down bracket and I'm going to just kind of put it where it needs to go. With our wires out of the way. That way I know where it needs to go. And we have the screw in place on that. And we don't have to worry about losing that while we're doing the rest of the work here on the truck. Not tightening it down all the way, just kind of putting it in place. And that's going to sit right here by this Nerf bar mount. So that's put in place. Alright, we can move along to our next portion of the project. We've got 3-part bags out of the way. D, C, and H are done and out of the way. We are not working in the correct order, but whatever. I think this is the best order to do it in. Working from the back of the truck, moving forward. Oh, next step. What do they show? They show the ESC going in, amongst other things, and I think we're going to move on to the front differential, drive shaft area, steering servo, and all that good nonsense and get that put into place. So let's go ahead here and move on to our steering servo and do that next. This guy right here, and get this put back into where it needs to go. looking at our instructions briefly here, right quick like, very small. Looking at our servo, they've got the servo horn or the gear there on the far right side. So we want to make sure that we put the servo in the right direction, facing the right direction. Servo in hand. I believe we're going to be installing this from the outside in. From the outside in, we're going in this way. So we're going to feed the wire in, and then feed the servo into place. Which, if I'm not mistaken, should sit in here just like this, right here. We'll take a look at the Ultimate Edition since we have it sitting here, just to make sure that we're doing that right. Yeah, they got the motor wire sitting on the same side over here on the right-hand side. Looking down underneath, yep, everything is right. It's sitting on the right-hand side. You guys can't see it, but I've seen it, so we're all good to go. This is how she is supposed to be sitting. And we'll go ahead and get our 4 servo screws and get those guys reinstalled. I'm not too sure if we're using the same screws or if we're using longer hardware here on this portion. It looks like we were using the same screws on that one. Put on the old reading glasses just to confirm things are good. There's an M3 by 8mm, I believe. That's holding our servo in place. And I don't know if this is an M3 by 8mm or not, but we'll look in our included hardware to see if they gave us anything else. No, they did not. So we are reusing our hardware right there. So reusing our servo hold down screws from the VXL edition to hold our servo into place here on the low center of gravity chassis. So the same M3s, or M4s, whatever they are, M something or other. Metric screw is what it is. And we'll get these 4 guys put into place, or at least started into place. Making sure there's no spacers or rubber washers or anything else to go in between. Gonna get all these guys started individually. And then we'll drive them home afterwards. So we got one in the upper right corner. I'm going to put one in the upper or lower left corner down here. Kind of X across that. If we can get it started. Sorry for the movement. Hopefully we can see what's going on camera. Hopefully the camera is still recording. Yeah, a little bit of wiggle room on the servo left to right, so I'm going to slowly snug things down here a little bit and just try to get this to sit, I think, in the center if possible. Or as center as we can possibly get it, I guess. Your guess is as good as mine on that one. I think as long as we have it roughly sitting in the center and everything should be okay. Not going to go crazy with these guys. We have 4 screws holding it down. We're screwing into plastic. Keep that in mind. Make sure that they're all kind of tighten them down uniformly before you go too crazy with tightening things down altogether. Don't want to strip nothing out. We've got our servo installed. I feel a lot happier if it had a couple lock nuts in there, but whatever. There it is. Servo is installed. Once again, we have to plug our electronics in, recenter the servo before we hook up the new servo horn and linkage. So we're just going to leave that as it is right there. All right, moving on to our next step. I think right now we're going to go ahead here and install our battery hold down area for the battery tray, and then go ahead and get our receiver box put in place, get our ESC put in place. and then we'll go ahead and install the front end and drive shaft and all that other nonsense. We're going to make sure to install our drive shaft before we install that front differential. So we'll go ahead here and get our battery tray stuff opened up, which is part bag E. Letter E. And get this stuff out of here. We have a new hold down bar right there. One bracket. Foam padding. More foam padding, more foam padding. And 4 screws, another bracket. So we have 2 shorter screws, 2 longer screws, both with tapered heads. And just a matter of getting all this stuff put in place along with the foam. So we'll get our brackets put in place first, and then we'll put our foam in after the fact, just to make sure that we're putting all this nonsense right where it's supposed to be. Let's take a peek at our instructions real quick. Our very nondescript instructions here. Looking at our hold down bracket on the front. It's got our little tab on the one side where the bracket slips into place. Tab is facing outside of the vehicle, the rest of it's facing inward. Our bracket on the back has our 2 little openings back here that's also facing inward. Looking for our screw sizes, we've got 2 shorter screws and 2 longer ones right here. 2 M3 by 10 millimeters, those go on the front. And we got 2 M3 by 15s that go on the back. So we'll go ahead and get this stuff installed real quick. Our longer screws at the back and our shorter screws at the front. Hopefully our camera doesn't give us any hassle here. First bracket, our little latch facing outward, facing the left side of the vehicle. And that's going to fit right into this notch right here. Just like so. So we'll get that fastened in place with our 2 smaller M3s. M3 by 10 millimeters. Got one started. Getting our second one started. Finding our hex driver wherever that went, over yonder, just out of my eyesight. Holding this bracket in place with my finger as I'm attaching the screws. Make sure to get them both pretty much in there before I run them down, just to make sure that everything is centered and sitting right where it needs to be sitting. I apologize to everybody out there for the video itself and the video quality and the camera turning on and off and stopping and starting. I apologize. When you're doing a build like this, you pretty much only have one shot at getting it done cohesively. And if the camera stops recording while you're in the middle of the build, that can seriously mess things up. And that's happened a couple times so far. And I apologize for that. I also apologize for this being the first time that I've done this, so I'm sure there's probably a couple other instructional videos that are much better. So we've got our battery hold down put in place on the front. Let's go ahead and get the one put in place on the back. Once again, our 2 little open tabs facing inward. And that's going to sit right back here on the slot. Just like that. Use our 2 longer M3s to hold these guys in place. Get one started. Get our second one somewhat started. Holding the bracket in place with my hand on the back side, kind of pinching everything together. Trying to ignore whatever's buzzing around me. Don't know if that was a fly or a bee, but something just buzzed around me. together. Voila, just like that. Time to get our foam inserts put into place. We'll look at their instructions briefly again just to see where they show that stuff going. We can look at the Ultimate Edition as well if we need some other reference points. Alright, so here's our chassis right there. We have one foam block that they're showing going right up at the front by that front hold down bracket. This other foam block, well, they're not very descriptive with that, but I believe it goes just in on the inside of this chassis rail, right on the inside rail. So at this point in time, let's take a look at the Ultimate Edition and see how that one is laid out, and then we'll go from there. But I believe right now, I'm thinking that our fat block goes right here in the front, just like this. And one of our other little strips goes right down the side, just like that. But we've got two of these strips, so maybe they want you to put one on each side, or it depends on how wide your battery is. We'll go ahead here and take a look at the Ultimate Edition just to make sure that we're putting things in the right place. Battery hold down out. This one has a small, thin layer of foam right here, and another one down this side on the outside of the chassis. Nothing on the inside layer, and nothing anywhere else. So we'll go ahead and put that fat block in place right here, which is this guy. We'll get that put in place, and then we'll take one of our thinner ones and lay it along the side. So we're getting it pretty much the same as what it is, how it's like on the Ultimate Edition. Or at least that Ultimate Edition. Taking our fat block, we'll peel the backer off of this guy. And then we're going to install this right here. Right in here. Just like this. Put some pressure on that just to make sure that we have that seated in place. Stuck down. I think we should be good with that. We'll take our next strip and lay it down the side just like that from front to back. These are both equal length on our other two strips. After peeling the backer off of it and getting this lined up and put into place. Which I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this or not, this process, but I think you get the idea, eh? To get it so she's laying in here flat before we start to stick it down. I didn't have it quite flat from front to back. Pretty close across the way. There we go. Making sure that we have that applied and stuck into place. Alright, so we're good to go on that aspect. I'm going to mock fit a battery in here real quick just to see if we might want another piece of padding in there or not. Try a hard pack and a soft pack. We'll try a 2S and a 3S and see what things look like. Alright, so we've got a 3S Electron Pro soft pack and a 2S Florian hard pack. We'll try the Florian hard pack in here just to see. Florian hard pack, one strip of foam. We're pretty good. We don't need any foam on the other side. It's a tight fit in there. Our soft pack, on the other hand, let's take a peek at that. Kind of loose with the soft pack. We could use that other piece of foam on the back edge running the soft pack. And since we're running soft pack batteries in our Traxxas Slash, we don't have any hard packs for ours. We have a 2S soft pack and a 3S soft pack that we're running in this guy. So we're going to go ahead here and install our other piece of foam down the opposite side of the battery tray. If you're running a hard pack battery in your vehicle, a 2S or a 3S hard pack in here, you'll probably be okay with just this one layer of foam down the outside edge. If you're going to a soft pack, it's a little bit narrower in overall width. You might need that second layer of foam down the inside edge, which is what we're going to do. Since we're running soft packs in both of our Traxxas Slashes, 2S and 3S, I'm also running a soft pack in my Losi 10, 2S and 3S identical batteries. But that is a totally different truck with a totally different setup. We'll go ahead and get this one installed. And run it down this side here. Making sure that that is pressed into place snugly and securely. We'll try our 3S battery again. And there we go, a nice snug fit with a 3S. Fits in between both layers of foam. Gives us good cushion on either side. Once again, hard pack, not going to fit with that other inner layer of foam on there. So pretty much just need that second layer of foam if you're running a soft pack versus a hard pack. So there we go. We have 2 layers of foam on either side. We are running soft packs. Not to be redundant, if you're running a hard pack, you only need 1 layer. Alright, we've got our battery tray put into place. Our hold down bar, we could put that in there right now, or we can wait till later. I think we're going to wait till later, just because we don't need this getting in the way while we're doing other stuff. So let's move on to our receiver box and ESC and get that put into place. Is our camera still recording? Yes, we are. That's good. And that is good. Part bag G. This is our receiver box, which has our upper and lower, along with our gaskets and everything else. So we'll pop this baby open. And take a peek of all this stuff. Here's our top half of the box right there. Bottom half of the receiver box, a little piece of double-sided tape. Here's our lower portion of it. We have some hardware and some other gasket material in here as well. This is our wire hold down right there. Here is our silicone grease for the gasket. Here is our O-ring gasket. I'm going to keep that clean. We have another piece of foam in here, right there, which goes on one of our wire hold downs, I believe. And then we have some hardware in here as well. Dumping out the hardware. We have 2 M3 cap head screws right there and there. We're going to set those guys upright in our magnetic tool tray. We have 2 M3 button head screws right here, roughly the same length, but a button head versus a cap head, and we're going to set those right next to the other guys. And then we have 2 M3 tapered screws right here, very small and short. I believe that's what's going to be holding our ESC down to the chassis, or the receiver box down to the chassis. You can pretty much assume that that is what's going to hold this guy down. So let's take a peek at our instructions once again. Looking at our receiver box area right here. We have our lower section, our gasket, our upper section. That little cushion right there that's got 2 little notches on either side. It goes in here at the top of the receiver box, apparently. And our other cushion goes on our wire hold down area over there. Our 2 M3s with the tapered heads on them right there. Those are the 2 small ones. That is what is being used to hold down our box. And then we have our 2 longer button head screws that appears to be right there to hold our receiver box top in place. And it looks like our cap head screws right there are what's holding our wire hold down in place. Alright, so there we go. Our 2 small screws are what's holding our receiver in place, or the actual box in place, so we'll get this put into place. Doesn't matter which way this is facing. It's facing the same either way. That's going to sit right about here on these 2 points. We get our driver ready, if we can find the darn thing right there. Get our 2 small M3s. Get one keyed up and ready to go. Run it through the bottom of the box. Get the box kind of put into place. And run this baby home. Once again, my apologies if you can't see exactly what's going on here. Little itsy bitsy screws. Not really missing out on anything, we're just getting this receiver box fastened down. The screw wasn't wanting to bite. There we go. It's not wanting to bite either. There we go. Put a little bit of pressure on that one to get her to bite in on the thread. Don't go crazy, just snug these down. You don't want to crack that box. You don't want to strip out the holes. Just want it snug down. There we go. So the lower portion is installed, all set on that one. The upper portion of the box, our little foam inserts and all that other good stuff. Looking at our foam inserts, we have one right here that has these little cutouts in it. Looking at the top half of our bracket area here. This might be getting laid in like this on the lid. Something like that, I believe. So this portion is probably going to go up here, I think. On this part of the lid, right up in here. Just like that. Just like that. So we're going to peel off that backer and get it stuck to the lid in this position. Get our backer peeled off ever so carefully. Other portion right here, we're going to try to get this so everything lines up with the screw holes and the back edge of the cover before we get this sucked down, just like this, just like that. So the back half of the foam isn't protruding or sticking out past the back half of this cover. Oops, and it's sitting in here just like that, just as a cushion to seal off our wires. Now the wires going in and out of the receiver box for the servo and the ESC, those guys are going to come out through this little slit right here, then they're going to drop through this little opening. So you want this padding on this back edge as a compression padding to seal out the elements. And we're going to put a layer of silicone grease across here before we put this together to make sure that it helps keep dirt and dust and water and stuff like that out of here. Now our next foam layer, I think we're going to apply right across here on the box itself. So this little chunk of foam right here, which has these tapered edges on it, has these little cut edges on either side, is going to fit right into this area right here, just like that. Just like that right there. So we'll go ahead and get these guys put into place, or this one put into place. Peeling off our backer ever so carefully. Starting with one corner down here, getting that put into place. Going up to the opposite corner and kind of stuffing that in there, just like that. And then applying pressure to make sure that we have that adhered and stuck down to the receiver box top. Just like so. So there we go. Our wires once again are going to be popping up through here, overlapping this way. We're going to put a layer of silicone grease across here, a layer of silicone grease across here, and then this is going to go on just like this and get screwed down, and that'll seal off the elements as best as it possibly can to keep the elements out of your receiver box. So there we go. We've got our foam installed, one across here and one across on the inside of the lid. Now, Traxxas was nice enough to include a lot of things in this kit, but one thing they did not include was double-sided tape for your receiver, for reapplying your receiver back into the new receiver box. They did not supply double-sided tape for that. So you're going to need a little chunk of double-sided tape to put back on your receiver to install it back into the receiver box. So just FYI on that, they did not include double-sided tape for the receiver to be reinstalled. Supply everything else, but just don't supply that. Just putting a little piece of double-sided tape on the back of the receiver so we can keep this held back down. Get this held back down. You want to make sure that you put your receiver in here in a location that's going to be copacetic with everything. So you might want to mock fit your lid and see how your lid's going to go on here, and mock fit your receiver just to see where you want that sitting at before you install anything. So we've got our lid, we've got our hold down bracket. I'm assuming all this stuff is going to be going to the outside of the chassis just like this. With our lid in place, our hold down bracket facing the right hand side of the chassis, opening over here on the left. I'm assuming that's how it's going to be going in here. Just like that. Taking a look at our other slash just to confirm everything, and yes, we are correct. The wires go to the outside of the chassis, so we have that facing the right direction. Now when it comes to installing our receiver into the receiver box, I'm going to install it just like this. So looking down on the chassis, we have our TQ kind of facing like that on the side. We need to have this light so we can see it shining through our lid. Our lid has a little hole right here with an opening on it so we can see our light flashing. So we want to make sure that we have this sitting in the right position so that everything will jive. And you want to leave room around the edge of the receiver in case you decide to add anything to this. If you add the Traxxas Complete BEC kit, there's actually a little BEC unit that sits on top of this receiver. So you want to make sure you leave some cushion around the outside of the edge of the box in case you need to add anything on top of the receiver later on down the line. So we'll go ahead here and try to get this put into place as carefully as we can. Once it's in here, it's pretty much in here once it makes contact with that double-sided tape. Put a little bit of pressure on it to make sure that it's set. And that's where it's going, right there. Just like that. Looking at our receiver here in its new location. Once again, good idea in the beginning to take a picture with your cell phone and make note of where your wires are plugged in into the actual receiver. If we look down here, the very bottom slot is channel 1. Just above that is channel 1 again. And then there's channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, battery. And then we have RPM and something else above that. VT, I believe. I'm not sure what that is. I'm sure it's for the TQI, all the other BS that you can plug into this thing. So channel 1, the way this thing was set up is that we had one plugged into channel 1 and another one plugged into channel 2 with a gap in between. So the lower channel 1 was being used for your steering. Our steering servo was plugged into the lowest one down here on channel 1. The next channel 1 is open, and then channel 2 goes out to your ESC. So just FYI on our locations for our wires and getting everything plugged back into place. And at this point in time, I think we're going to go ahead and get the passenger side Nerf bar put in place over on this side before we do the rest of our receiver box. That way we don't have to worry about fighting those screws and going around the screws for the Nerf bars. So we'll go ahead here and get one Nerf bar put in place on the passenger side just to get that out of the way. And these guys are pretty much universal from side to side, our Nerf bars. Pretty easy to install once you get your wires out of the way. Bring it in through the bottom. It kind of fits in these little grooves, which we're probably not catching on camera. Just kind of snap it into place, just like that. And it should sit flush on the bottom of the chassis. You should not be hanging down at all on the sides of the chassis. This should be relatively flush with your Nerf bars. And we just need to add our 4 screws in on top and get that fastened down. And for that, we're going to go to our hardware bag right here. Open this guy up. Dump these guys out into our tool tray, and then we'll see what screws we need for our Nerf bars. Looking at our manual, pulling this guy out. Our brief little manual here, we have what's showing our screws over here off to the side right there. And those are M3 by 10 millimeter. So we're going to have 8 M3 by 10 millimeters to hold those Nerf bars in place. 8 M3 by 10. So that should be pretty easy. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right there. So we'll go ahead and get these guys installed. And get our Nerf bars attached, essentially. One started. Make sure to hold the bottom of the Nerf bar down when you're getting these things started, because we're screwing in from the top. So if you push down too hard, you're going to push the Nerf bar right out of its slot. One of our front ones installed. Trying to work around our wires here, which once again is the reason why we're doing this now, so we don't have to fight these wires later on, or fight the receiver box cover or the hold down or any of that other stuff. Just get these guys put in right now. And since we're here, we might as well do the other ones on the other side. Like I said, it's my first time doing this conversion, so excuse me for jumping around a little bit here on what we're doing first and what we're doing second and third and fourth and all that other good stuff. Traxxas doesn't really necessarily give you a B, C starting point, or a 1, 2, 3 starting point. They don't tell you on the instructions necessarily where to start from. So your guess is as good as mine on that. I'm just trying to look at the instructions and make the most sense out of it as I possibly can, and translate it to you guys in a way that's going to be the easiest to install. Good starting point and good finishing point. That way you don't have a whole bunch of parts laying on a table at once and not know where everything goes. Better off just trying to get it done in some kind of order with some kind of method to eliminate a lot of the madness. And our last screw right here. Let's finish tightening this guy down. We'll be all set on the passenger side Nerf bar. Just like that. I believe she is held down there pretty good. This one's not quite in all the way. And there we go. We've got one installed, 1, 2, 3, and 4 screws all installed, and she's all good to go. Passenger side Nerf bar is in place. Go ahead and slap on the driver's side one right now. Might as well. We're doing it. The room's already paid for. Might as well get this one on there. There we go. Snapped in. Just a matter of running the screws home and calling this one good. One started, moving to the next. And the last one. Put a little pressure on that last one. It didn't want to bite. sure that those are good and tight. I can feel the plastic being pulled up into the chassis on the bottom half with my fingers on the bottom of the chassis. I could feel it getting snugger and snugger as we were tightening it down. Everything becoming flush at the same time. As we're pulling that bracket into place. And there we go, we've got our Nerf bars installed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws. Everything is sitting nice and flush across the bottom of the chassis. Nerf bars are countersunk into the chassis. Very nice and clean. So there we go, we've got all that taken care of. We still haven't ran our wires into the ESC as of yet. We still haven't put our antenna into position. We still haven't hooked up our motor wires or any of that other good nonsense. But right now we are going to move on to the front section and start getting that put into place, and then we'll go ahead and get all this stuff buttoned back up. So we're going to go ahead and grab our other section of the slash, the other half of the slash, take the front end apart, that way we can put it onto this part. So just so we can add our two pieces together. In the meantime, I'm going to take our beat up drive shaft, which is pretty beat up from all those scratches, and get that put back into place, sliding it in through the front and right over top of our drive shaft slip joint down there, just like so. And we're just going to leave that sitting in the chassis, that way we can plug everything in when we're ready. So we'll set this part off to the side and grab the other portion of the chassis. Right here, our front portion. On our old chassis, Nerf bars are attached kind of through the sides on this one. They go right through the sides. And once again, totally different chassis design. As to which one is better for off-road and jumping and skate park crap, I don't know. That's up to you. Once again, the only reason that we're necessarily switching it out is just to get this drive shaft, or the center drive shaft, up higher, so we don't have to worry about rocks and debris getting wedged underneath it and bringing everything to a halt. So we'll go ahead and start stripping off our front stuff. We're going to start with the front bumper. We're going to remove these two screws right here, this guy here and this guy here. And then we're going to remove these three guys right down here to pull our bumper right off the front end. Or to remove our bumper. The two on top are M3s. And put these in the tray in a place that we know where they go. And that is one long M3. Mental note on that. That's a pretty long M3 right there. Set that up in the front of the tool tray so we know it goes on the front of the truck. Be much faster removing this stuff with a cordless screwdriver, but once again, I don't like using those when I'm working on stuff. I'd rather do everything by hand. That way you make sure that you're not stripping anything out. Second one removed. Put that off to the side. Change out heads, go to our M4. Whatever fatter head on our hex. Flip this guy over and remove our three screws that are holding the bottom of the bumper in place. Hopefully we can see what's happening. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Maybe the camera's working, maybe it's not. I don't know. This camera has stopped recording about 10 times so far during this video, which is downright maddening. Makes things difficult when you're trying to do a tutorial or a how-to video on something. Oh, there goes our flash. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. It's still working. That's not good. Usually means it's about to quit. We're still working. We're still working. Okay, we got our three screws out. These guys are pretty fat. They've got a tapered head on them. We're going to put those in with our other bumper screws so we know where they all came from, up in the front of the tool tray. Last one removed. We should be able to peel our bumper off of here. There we go. The whole front bumper section has been removed. Hopefully we're still recording. Yes, we are. Okay. We're going to take a paper towel and wipe all this debris off of here, because this is the bottom half of the transmission essentially, or the front differential. So we're going to get this nice and clean, or as clean as we can possibly get it for the time being. That way we can get everything back together nicely. Put our bumper off to the side. Alright, next step. What are we looking at here? We've got our front little hold down pin, our little screw that's holding everything down, a mess of oil that we're leaking out here. We've got shock oil or something that's diff oil possibly that's leaked all over the place down here. Wiping off some of this other dirt and debris just to try to keep things as clean as possible. Definitely a lot easier working on a clean vehicle than it is on a dirty vehicle. So as with the rear shocks, we're going to go ahead here and disconnect the front shocks right from the shock tower. Get these guys out of the way, put our hardware back into the holes right where they go. That way we don't have to worry about fighting the shocks for pulling out our pins. We're going to need to pull out this front screw right here for our little keeper that holds our hinge pins in place. Then we need to pull our keeper, pull our hinge pins, remove a few other screws across the front. These two guys right here, we're going to need to take those guys out. These two guys down here, we're going to need to take these guys out. And that should drop our whole lower section right off of the vehicle. I believe we're going to have to take out these two screws as well on the bottom half of the skid plate so we can remove that skid plate. So let's go ahead and just start with our shocks. We'll get our shocks removed. We'll go ahead and get this plate removed. That way we know where all that goes, and then we'll go from there. Are we still recording? Yes, we are. Okay, we're good. That darn camera shutting off makes this a pain in the butt. Tell you what. Get our front screw removed for our hold down plate or keeper plate. I'm sure there's a technical name for that plate. And I'm sure that it's not going to come to my mind anytime soon. Pretty long M3 on that guy. A little bit of grease or grime on the back edge of it, wiping it clean. We're going to pull this keeper plate off of here. We're going to put our M3 back into it, and we're going to put this face down in the right direction so we know what direction this came off of and what direction that screw goes into. Pretty dirty, pretty nasty. Going to wipe it off real quick. Better to start with clean stuff than just put a bunch of dirty crap back on there. Dirt and debris gets in the way of things and causes things not to fit correctly again. Tolerances and what have you. Making sure this is facing the right direction that we took it off in. Putting the screw back in the right direction that we took it out in. I'm going to set this down inside our tray, face down. Okay, we can pull out our pins anytime we wanted to at this point in time, but we're going to leave them in there until we get our shocks and everything else removed. Switching out our heads again on the driver. Once again, nice thing about these team associated drivers is that the heads are magnetically attached and they go together and come apart relatively easy. Quick change on the hex drives, different size hexes. Makes it convenient for doing stuff like this. This does have a washer on the back edge of the screw, just like it did on the rear shocks. I'm trying to make sure to get that washer at the same time. There we go, got the washer and the screw. Try to get the screw off of there without dropping the washer, and there we go. There's a screw, shoulder on the screw. Right down here there's a small shoulder which fits through the eyelet on the shock. Make sure we have our washer on there, which goes on the back side of it in between the shock and the shock tower. And there goes our flash again. That's bad news. Are we still recording? Yep, we are at the moment. Okay. Gotta love it. Gotta love those little holdups. Well, we had a camera snafu there. Camera locked up on us. We had the other shock removed in the meantime. Thought the camera was recording and it locked up on us. So we seen one shock get removed. I went ahead and removed the other shock. That was on camera, but it didn't record, so I guess it's not on camera. So there we go. Both shocks are removed, sitting off to the side. We're going to go ahead here and start removing our 4 inner screws that are holding this front clip in place. These guys here, along with these 2 lower screws down here that are holding the front transmission or the front differential onto the skid plate. Not front transmission, but front differential. Getting all discombobulated with our camera shutting on and off. That's a real hassle. So we're still using our fatter hex drive screw here, or driver. start loosening up these guys on our inside chassis screws. And there goes that darn flash again. Oh my god. It's still working at the moment. Like I said, I need to put a mirror on the back half of this phone so I can see when that thing flashes like that, if it's still recording or if it's locked up. One of the last times it happened, it locked up. And I thought it was recording. And we're still recording, okay. What a pain in the butt. Wave hi to our snowman over there. What's up, man? Did you see that? I waved and he waved, like I said. That's crazy. And a couple times I noticed when I was reviewing the tape there, when the camera was shutting on and off, he was turning at the same time as well. Could be a coincidence. Might not be, who knows. We'll go ahead and remove our top screws. Our possessed, abominable bobblehead snowman up there. Seems to respond to people talking to him. Checking our screw lengths here. Okay, it's the ones in the back. The ones back here are shorter. The ones that we're pulling out of the front are longer. So I'm going to make sure to separate these guys a little bit. Put the short ones on the back of the table and the longer ones on the front so I know where they go. Back to our possessed little Frosty the Snowman figurine over there, bobblehead. He's been out here for about 3 years now, maybe 4. I've been observing the movements, and I can honestly tell you that it's got absolutely nothing to do with light or anything like that. And we're still recording, okay. It's got absolutely nothing to do with light. It just it seems to move on its own. Sometimes it won't move for weeks or months, no matter what the lighting condition is in here. And other times it'll move as soon as you wave to it or talk to it or anything like that. So it's kind of weird. I'm not saying it's possessed. I'm not saying it's not either. There's definitely something up with it. One of the ones that we're pulling out of the bottom here, this guy is tapered, so mental note on that. The other guys were button head screws. We still recording? Yep, we're recording, okay. Go set this thing down and get our screw removed. Alright, so this should just pull right up and off of here, if I'm not mistaken. Just like that. So there we go. Upper chassis has been separated from that lower differential area. And we can set this off to the side. Jeez, are we still recording? Got that infamous dreaded camera flash there. Set our chassis plate off to the side. There you go, Cole. There's your chassis, and there's another flash on our flash. Is it still recording? 4 minutes and 25 seconds. Do you got something to do with this? I don't know if he does or not. Alright, so we're looking at our steering linkage right there. We got our bell cranks down here on either side. If we're seeing it on camera, looking at our steering linkage, bell cranks on either side. Right there. Our front pinion for the differential. And we're all set on that. All we need to do right now is just basically remove our pins, and this little bit right here should fall out, if I'm not mistaken. You gotta be careful about our steering linkage and all this stuff. We need to reattach this stuff up onto our new skid plate right here. So we'll go ahead right now, and we're gonna pull our pins out right here, and that should separate our differential from our lower cradle down here that we're going to be replacing with the new one. So let's set that right there. Make sure our camera's still recording. Okay, we're still recording. We'll get a knife. We'll crack open our next bag. Last parts bag here. Get this thing peeled open. Pull out our new lower pan portion. We have 4 screws in here as well. Get these guys out of here. All button heads. We've got 2 longer ones and 2 shorter ones. Right there. We're going to put those right next to the ones that we removed, with the longer ones at the top and the shorter ones at the bottom. Just like so, which we can't see on camera, but they're right there, laying on the table. Alright, we're still looking at everything. Can we still see everything okay since I just moved the camera? I apologize. There we be. Alright, let's get these guys pulled. Here's one. Here's the other. A bit of grease and grime and grit and whatever else on there. We'll wipe that stuff off of there. Probably shock oil in all reality. Shock oil and dirt. Mental note, these shocks were leaking from day one. Day one they were leaking. Alright, so we need to transfer all this stuff here back onto this plate here, including our bell cranks off of the steering. Your A-arms separated real quick. Drop those down and out of the way. Lower control arms. That's pretty much holding up our works with the lower control arms. Trying to keep this clean at the same time with dirt and debris getting into the differential. Yeah, it might have been better just to take the tires off of this instead of doing all this nonsense right here that we're messing with. This just kind of snaps on here, I believe. There we go, we got that separated. Now we still need to separate our steering links right here. Our bell cranks. I believe that these guys are screwed in right here on either side. Yes, they are. We've got two big cap head screws holding our steering links in place that we need to remove. That's the bad thing about these instructions, is they don't show you the removal process on any of this stuff. This has a washer on top, right there, a small washer. Making sure to put that back onto that cap head screw that I removed it from in the right direction. Removing our other M3 cap head off the, bell crank. Hopefully the camera's still recording. Downright maddening, I tell you. I know I've said it before and I'm saying it again. It's maddening. Alright, so there's our other M3, whatever, and whatever. We're going to take this skid plate off of here. Should be able to slide this right up and off on both ends. I say should be able to. Still fitting on there pretty darn tight. Seems like something's holding that down. Not sure what. Friction possibly. Taking a screwdriver into the back half of it just to try to pry it away a little bit. Very carefully. There we go. Got some separation on one. Making sure not to jab my hand, making sure not to scar up this bracket, and making sure not to scar up the bell cranks. Trying to apply a little bit of tension on there to get these guys moving. There is bearings on the back half of here. I'm going to try to face this down. Our differential is open and flipped upside down right now too, so this is just a real mess, I'm sure. Right, we've got those guys out, two bearings still sitting on the posts. Use a rag to wipe that stuff off, pull those bearings off of there, and then reinsert them. Easier said than done. These guys are stuck on here pretty darn good. That baby was on there. Put that back into place. Wow. Tight fit. Yeah, it was definitely a tight fit, and that lower plate was greasy as all get out. Easy. Between the shock oil that was leaking in there and the grease that was in there, it turned into a nice little runny mess on that lower portion down in here. Sorry, Cole. That's a mess, buddy. Alright, looking at our new piece right yonder. And checking out our instructions. Make sure that we put this all back together the way it's supposed to go. Checking out our instructions on this end. We've got our skid plate facing the back. Differential sitting on just like that. So we see what position our bell cranks are going to be going in. They're going to be sitting on these rods right here. And hopefully we get all this stuff put in the right spot that it needs to go. Because they're not necessarily telling you which side each bell crank is going on. So we're just going to flip this upside down and just kind of put it right back together in the same order that we had it, that we took it apart in as far as the bell cranks go. Taking our skid plate, putting it right back onto that lower differential. Taking a peek inside this differential right now just to make sure that there's no crap in here, which there was a little bit of something sticking up right there. I don't know what that was, but it was kind of stringy looking. Get that out of there. Otherwise, she's pretty well lubed up in there. We'll go ahead and get our new cover put back on. I think we're going to need to hook up our bell cranks beforehand, ahead of time, because that's going to sit below the cover. Just like that. So we need to get our bell cranks hooked up and then get our plate put back into place. I'm doing this upside down on camera. There we go. Our bell cranks are kind of slid in partially. Bearings are popping out on the top, of course. We're probably not even seeing this on camera. There's one bearing that just popped out. Other bearing right here. It's lovely. Traxxas, I thank you for your crappy instructions. Very much appreciated. Get these bearings pop back down in here again, where they belong. Just like that. Okay, so we got our bearings in. Bell crank system is kind of sitting where it needs to sit. We're going to go ahead here and slap our lower differential cover back on. And our flash just kicked on and off, so are we still recording? We are at the moment. But we know what that means, don't we? It's going to stop recording any minute. Alright, we're going to take our little button head screws that are holding our bell cranks on and put those back in place. Just so we know those bell cranks aren't going anywhere. Get a little hex driver back out and get these guys attached. Hopefully we can see what's happening. Screwing in the plastic, so don't go crazy here. Just holding them back down. Making sure that everything works left to right. Yep, and the camera flash just shut off again. Are we still working? Yes, we are. Okay. This is getting to be a problem. We can go ahead and put 2 screws back in here on the bottom to get this guy somewhat held back together, which are going to be our 2 tapered screws that we removed earlier. We'll find our 2 tapered screws and get those guys put back into place. One right here. And our other one right there, relatively short. Hopefully we are still recording. Ha 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 ha. That darn flash, I tell ya. That flash is a giveaway. See that flash flashes, it's like game over. Yeah, it's still working. Okay, we're getting our screws put in place. Just snugging these guys down too. Don't go crazy. Don't go crazy. You're just screwing in the plastic. Make sure that they're in there and not stripped. There we go. So we got that back together. New lower section put on. Once again, we still need to put a new linkage on down here, so we have to swap that out still. We can go ahead and hook up our shocks and get our lower control arms put back into place. So we'll go ahead and get our lower control arms put in place first. Which is one right here. We'll get our pin put in for that guy. Get out of the tray. Magnetic tool tray doesn't want to let go of it. Alright, sliding one in. There we go. There's one. Get our other one. Lean back and make sure our camera's still working. Yep, we're still working. Darn thing. Try to get our other one put in place. And we're almost there. There we go. We got that guy sitting home. We can put our keeper plate back on. Make sure our shocks are spun back up and sitting in the right spot. Putting our keeper plate back on. Flat side down, taper facing up. Long screw going in. Trying to do this kind of one-handed here. There we go. We got that guy on. On our M3 back home. Change out the head on our driver so we can send that guy home. Keeping it held down with my thumb as I drive the screw in. Not going crazy on the screw, just snug it down. Just like that. And we're all set with our keeper. So we've got that put back on. We can go ahead and get our shocks put back into place at this point in time. Well, barring camera snafus, once again, more camera issues. We're going to go ahead here and get our shocks hooked back up on the front. And then get our front bumper put back in place. Then we're going to swap out our steering linkage on the bell cranks. And then we'll get this whole front section put back into the vehicle. Once again, shock screws, got the shoulder on it, inserting that into the shock, putting the washer on after the fact. Shiny side of the washer. Washers have two different sides, in case people do not know this. There is a real shiny side with rounded edges on it. And then there is a flat steel side back here with sharp edges on it. The shiny side with the round edges on it goes towards the back here, and the flat side faces in. So the shiny tapered side faces the shock, and the flat side faces the shock tower. We're putting this right back into that center hole where we got it from. Pretty much threading it all the way home by hand. I have to put the handle back on here and finish tightening that up in a second. Get our other shock screw removed. Put the screw through the shock. Back through the eyelet. Make sure to put our washer back on, facing the right direction. Sure we're using the right hex driver. Just picked up the M3 driver, which is not an M3 hex. It's a whatever 1 point something millimeter or 1 millimeter or whatever it is. It is written on these hexes as to what they are. I usually don't think about it like that though. I usually think about it as the size that fits an M3 and the size that fits the next one, and so on and so forth. So snugging these guys back down, making sure that we're not stripping them out. We've got both our front shocks reattached. We'll take a peek, make sure we're still recording. Yes, we are. Okay, that's good. Alright, so our front shocks are reattached. We can actually put the bumper on if we wanted to at this point in time, but to make this a little bit more user-friendly and workable, we're going to leave the bumper off. We're going to move our bell crank slightly to the left, just like that, and we're going to go ahead from the underside and remove the M3 screw that's holding our steering linkage in place. And then we're going to go ahead and put our other steering linkage on that this vehicle came with in the kit, which is this one right here, and the other servo horn. And this should be already adjusted to length, if I'm not correct. I think we're going to use the other one as a reference as to what direction this thing actually goes in when you're attaching it. We can look at our instructions here and get a brief, quick idea of this. Right there is our new linkage being mounted onto the bell crank. And we've got a straight end and a curved end right here. They want the curved end going towards the servo horn. So keeping that in mind, the straight end's going onto the linkage on the bell crank. The curved end looks like it's facing up. It's curving upward. Servo horn is in a upward position. So trying to make mental note of all that nonsense. Alright, let's get our new system. Well, let's get our other stuff disconnected here real quick before we hook up the new one, just to keep our hardware separated. So I'm just going to flip this thing onto its nose, hold the servo horn in the correct position, or the linkage in the correct position, get this guy unthreaded. Crossing my fingers that we're still recording. Not to be redundant, but it's a redundant problem. So here's our linkage. Here's the screw that's holding everything together. I'm just going to pull that screw right out because I'm pretty sure we're going to be using a very similar one to put it back together. Putting it off to the side. Grabbing our bag, opening it up. I'm going to dump our hardware out onto our instructions, which, well, into my hand at least. We've got our linkage. We've got our servo horn. Small screw for the servo horn, M3, to attach it to the servo, which we've already got one on there, so we're going to use our pre-existing one if we don't have to use that one for that particular purpose. Two longer M3 button head screws, and we're going to put those in the magnetic tool tray for the moment. There's our servo horn. We're going to put that in the magnetic tool tray, and our other part right here. So once again, we're reusing that other screw that we pulled out of there, because I believe that's going to be about the same size. Now, according to the instructions, looking at our linkage back here, our bell crank system, we want that rod facing this way with the bend facing up. And we're going to have to hook this up to the bottom of this bell crank. So hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing here. We got the bell crank system facing us currently. Linkage on this is facing upward, like that, and we're going to hook it up just like this. Going through the bottom. Now they got this flip-flopped. They got the eyelet kind of flip-flopped here. They've got the flat spot on the eyelet right here, and another flat spot right here. And that one flat spot's in the wrong direction. If we put it on the way that it's supposed to go, just like this, with the flat spot sitting in the right place, it puts our connection point down here lower. And I believe that needs to be facing up. So one of these eyelets is facing the wrong direction on here. And I'm going to spin that around. That's just something I'm catching right now with my naked eye. Hopefully we're seeing it on camera. Our little eyelet inserts, there's a flat spot here and a not so flat spot here. This spot would be going on our link down here. So it sits nice and flush and flat and gives us a strong surface area, a good surface area. Same thing with our servo, where it attaches to the servo horn. We've got this big flat spot right here and less of a flat spot on this side, so the screw goes in on this side. This part mates up with the servo horn, so you have good contact area. Next step is to give this a little 180 turn. Not sure what direction I want to go in on that. One's going to make it go a little left, one's going to make it go a little right. I guess we're just going to cross our fingers and turn it counterclockwise a little bit. Just like that. We'll try it like that and see if that does a job. We still recording? Okay, yes we are. Alright. Trial and error, everybody. My apologies. Their instructions are terrible from Traxxas, and this is my first time doing this. And I'm trying to do this in a way that everybody can follow along with relative ease. And be able to get this done without having to worry about throwing on a pair of reading glasses and trying to decipher Traxxas' hieroglyphics on their crappy instruction sheet. Now the instructions that come with the, I've got a TRX4 long travel lift kit for my TRX4 Bronco sitting here, and I got it for Christmas and I haven't installed it yet. But it's been sitting here for a little while. And the instructions that come in that are awesome. They are very clear, colored instructions. It's like a little brochure, a little booklet that you flip through, colored pages on that. Very clear instructions. But as we've seen, the instructions for this are garbage. They are terrible. Alright, so there we go. We've got our linkage hooked up to our bell crank system. So that is all good to go. We need to get our servo horn put in place on that, so we'll go ahead and get our servo horn put in place. Probably the exact same servo horn, I'm guessing. It looks pretty darn similar overall. A little slight different bend on it. Slightly different bend on our servo horn from where it attaches. Our stock one is kind of bending out, and this one is kind of bending down. So going in a different direction with these guys. So yes, we definitely needed the other servo horn on there. And it's going to be going on like this with our servo horn opening facing us. So that can attach onto the servo. And all we need is a long M3 for that one, which comes in the kit. Take one of these longer M3s that came in our little bag there. Threading through the back half and into the servo horn. Making sure to get that threaded in there straight. And hopefully we can see what is happening here. Okay. We've got our servo horn attached. There we go on that. So that is all good to go. I believe we can get this guy attached to the front of the truck at this point in time. So either A, we put the front bumper back on it right now, or B, we attach it to the truck. I think we'll go ahead and get the front bumper reattached on this guy while we're here before we get any more screws lost or separated or anything like that. We've got our front clip, we've got our front bumper. Our front bumper also is part of the hold down there. It has a couple little holes in the bumper that go towards our hinge pins for the lower control arms. Fits on pretty easily once again. We have our two longer M3s going in on top and two shorter M3s on the bottom. I've got those separated in our tool tray. Our two longer M3s right there. They go in through the top. Right through here. Probably not catching it, but that's where they go. In between the front differential and the bumper mount. Joining those two together. Not tightening them all the way down just yet. Once again, I want to make sure that I get all the screws in place before I drive any of them home all the way. Hopefully we can see what's happening here. I'm just guessing. It's the camera angles. Those are 2/3 of the way down, most of the way down. Go ahead here and get our 3 fatter screws started on the bottom here, which aren't quite lining up good. There we go. That's why you want to leave things loose, just to make sure that is all lined up. And we have our 3 tapered head M4s down here on the bottom. Awkward position to work in, trying to get it in a position that you guys can actually see it. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere. Alright, well, we got them all started. That's a good sign. Switch hands. Make sure, take a look at the camera. Still recording. Okay, that's good. Start getting these guys into their grooves. They're sitting into the little recessed pockets. They're all recessed. Good. Don't go crazy with this stuff. It's very easy to strip this stuff out. Just want a snug plus a little teeny mini bit. Most people would probably just tell you to stop at snug, which is probably a better idea. But I usually give it a little extra turn at the end, 1/16 or a quarter. Trying to line this up sideways so you guys can see, but I shouldn't worry about that. I should just worry about me. When I was home, snug. And we're good. Alright, so our front bumper is reattached. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Good to go. We can get our front clip attached back onto the body. Our chassis, main chassis. And we're getting a lot closer to being finished. Still have to hook up our servo, but I think we're going to do that after the fact because we're not going to be able to hook it up too well in between time. Drive shaft. We've got our original drive shaft right here. OG. All scratched to hell and back. Excuse my French. Excuse my language. Don't want to insult any French people. Sater Rotus, what's up, buddy? Anybody know Pascal Sater Rotus? He's over in France. We're going to start out with a brand new drive shaft. We've got one sitting here. Part number 6855. 6855, and this is a blue drive shaft, or half shaft, center dog bone shaft, whatever. So we got our beat up one right there, and we've got a brand new one. Nothing wrong with the beat up one other than being beat up, but we'll keep that around for a spare since we're redoing the chassis and all that other good nonsense. We're just going to start out with a brand new drive shaft so we can get a nice fresh start on everything all the way around. Alright, so we need to get our center drive shaft lined up with our front differential. We need to get our our little bell cranks here lined up with the holes, depressions in the chassis for the bell cranks as well. So a lot of stuff that we gotta kind of have to get lined up here in order to make this happen relatively smoothly. I'm not too sure how smoothly this is going to go. I'm sure all of you over out there in the world are getting a better view than me on any of this nonsense. You get that drive shaft to line up. Might have to spin the tires a little bit to get that to lock in. Holding one of the tires so we can make sure that the differential's spinning. I think that we're in. Yep, we're locked in down there on the drive shaft. Everything is kind of sitting in the chassis right at the moment. We can start running these screws in. Now we have to hold this in place upward like this while we're doing this. I'm holding it together with my hand, sandwiching it together with my hand before we run these screws back into everything. And if I'm not mistaken, we've got the shorter screws at the bottom down here and the longer screws at the top on our M4s. So I need to get one primed up on a wrench and ready to go. And I've got the wrong hex driver on my wrench. Very awkward. Trying to get this so you guys can see it and I can see what I'm doing at the same time. And using my left hand and not my right hand to run these screws in. And that one's not biting. That one is not biting. Try to hold this together with my right hand, or left hand, and screw it together with my right hand. Yeah, this video is a real cluster bleep, eh? There we go. Alright, we got that one started. Let's go ahead and get one in on the front, just to get a little bit more support going on up here. I'm going to crisscross it. We're starting at the bottom left corner. We're going to the front right corner. Not running it down all the way, just kind of getting it in there. We're going to go to the other far side over here on the lower right corner. And get this one started. Trying to hold it at the bottom with my other finger. Holding the bottom of the screw in place. And there's our flash. Are we still recording? Yep, we are. Okay, that's good. At least we're still recording. And we're getting closer. And there goes the flash again. I tell ya. Interruptions. Don't know if the camera's recording or not when it does that. Flash turns on, flash turns off. Sometimes I look back and it's locked up completely. And we're still good. Okay. We've got two screws somewhat snug. Apologize for the views on our screws. Screw views. Screw views. V-I-E-W-S. Don't be misconstrued by what I said. I think we're all pretty good there on those guys. I'm going to hit them with the right hand here real quick. Just because I've got better judgment on how tight things are with my right hand versus my left. I am right-handed, but I'm also a little bit ambidextrous. I used to be able to spell my name with both hands when I was a kid, and they just kind of pushed me towards the right hand. So there we go. All right, we got our front end all hooked back up, nice and smooth across the bottom. All our screws are intact. We still have to hook up our servo horn, but we need to zero our servo out, make sure it's all centered before we do that. We need to get our electronics all hooked up and good to go, so I think we're going to move on to the electronics portion of the program here and start getting this stuff all plugged back in. Motor wires are pretty easy. Nothing really to mess up there. Follow the colors, and that is basically it. White to white, yellow to yellow, blue to blue, and then we need to get these repositioned and held in underneath the hold down bracket on the side, making sure that we don't interrupt with our fan. So our hold down bracket for the wires is right down here. So we need to loosen that guy up, get these guys in a nice cohesive position, and then reattach it. Alright, so loosening the hold down bracket up right here, taking it out of the way. There we go. I'm going to kind of push our wires down one at a time. I'm starting with the blue wire, kind of getting it down to where it needs to go. I'll show you guys what I come up with here after I'm done. I'll make sure that I've got these wires off of the fan, away from the fan. Next wire down in there, kind of, sort of. And get our third wire in there as well. Don't want these to interrupt with the fan. I'll make sure our hold down bracket's on here nicely, and we don't want to mar up the wires in any way, shape, or form in the process as well. And you don't want to damage the wires or scar the wires, cut the wires, pinch the wires in any way, shape, or form. I'll make sure that these wires are sitting in here in a way that I will be happy with them. 99% of the time, I'm the guy that's working on it. Working on these vehicles anyways. My brother does work on RCs from time to time. He does build RCs. He's been building RCs as long as me for the most part. But generally I do all the work on this stuff around here. Making sure that I got everything right where I want before I finish tightening things down. Don't have to go too crazy. It's just a little bracket that's a little finger that's holding the wires in place. Here's where I've got ours sitting. Slightly clocked to the left. Right around 11 o'clock. In between 11 and 12. All our wires kind of neatly ran. Making sure that they're not coming into contact with our hot racing fan on top of the ESC. So we're all good to go there. That should work for the moment. Just a matter of getting our ESC and steering servo plugged back into the receiver and getting our antenna ran again, or re-ran. So we need to run all these wires in and out of that receiver box top cover. We also need to get our O-ring put in place, our gasket put in place. So we'll slide our gasket on right now and get that where it needs to be. Sliding it over the antenna. Gasket just fits into a little groove on the receiver box. Make sure it's inside the groove. You could put a little bit of silicone grease around that if you wanted to, but generally those gaskets are meant not to have any on it. I got another one of these tubes open already, so we'll get into that one instead. Putting our leftover hardware back up in here real quick. Get our receiver box top cover. Make sure we're still recording. Okay, we're good. Remove our screws from the top. Put those in the corner of the tray where we know where they go. Get that off of there. So once again, we need to run wires out and wires back in. Taking all the screws onto this guy so there's no confusion. Running our antenna wire out. Which we want to keep, I believe, to the left-hand side so it can go closer, so it can reach the antenna tube. We're going to put our antenna tube on right now before we fasten our lid on and run the rest of our wires in. We want to get this kind of ran and put into position because we're probably going to have some excess antenna that we're going to need to kind of stuff back in here inside the receiver box. Gently wrap in there, I should say, not stuff in there. So what happened to that antenna tube? It's got to be floating around here somewhere. There it is right there. Take our antenna tube, feed it back up into the antenna. Once again, do not damage your antenna tube. or your antenna. Don't trim it. It needs to be the length that it is. We'll get this reinserted down here. Move our steering servo wire out of the way. Alright, so we can see, hold this up here so we can see what we're doing. Our new location for the antenna is right here. There's a little hole in our chassis for the antenna and the grub screw right in this area. So we're going to get that guy put back into place. Show you what it looks like here in between time. Just like that. And where is our little grub screw? Right there. Take a little grub screw, get that guy reinstalled. Making sure that we don't lose that thing. Screwing into new plastic here, so be prepared. Be prepared to start a fresh thread. And try not to cross thread it. Basically, this grub screw is acting like a wedge to hold that main antenna tube in place, that plastic antenna tube. There we go. So our grub screw is put back into place down here. We've got our antenna tube in place, and a lot of it, like excess antenna hanging off right here that we need to tuck back into the receiver box. I'm just going to gently kind of wrap that antenna tube back towards the front of the receiver and around the side a little bit. Ultimately, it's probably just going to be wedged in there in some way, shape, or form. Our gasket's moving around on us down here. Trying to get that all put back into place. We'll run our other wires in at this point in time. Our steering servo and our electronic speed controller, get those guys put into position. Slipping it through the top of the box. Trying to get all excess wire inside here so we don't have that much hanging out inside the truck. Electronic speed controller, same thing, making sure the feet of wire in nice and flat. So it's going to be laying flat across that soft, spongy gasket there. Foam gasket. Get our ESC and our steering servo plugged back into the right spots here on the receiver. 15 minutes and 20 some seconds there. Okay. Alright, so our steering servo is going to get plugged into channel 1 at the very bottom of the receiver. Very bottom of the receiver, channel 1 is where the steering servo is plugged into, I believe. Generally, channel 1 is your steering, because that is your first and foremost priority. And then channel 2, which is our throttle, we're going to put that into channel 2. So channel 1, it has two slots once again, channel 1, then channel 1 again, and then channel 2. So we're basically skipping a slot and plugging into the next one, which is channel 2. Hopefully. Got so many Traxxas remotes laying around, I got to make sure that I'm finding the right remote for the right vehicle. Alright, so we got that one. Let's find a battery for this guy. We'll throw the 3S in it for the second because that's what we normally run in here anyways. Just to make sure that we're all good to go. we got that plugged in. Fans on. Radio's on. That is our steering. We got our steering servos working. We're going to go ahead here and center that while we're here. Bringing the center up to 0 on our steering trim. And that was all the way left before previously. So there we go there. We're all good to go. Alright, so all that nonsense is good to go. Everything works great. We can go ahead and button up the top of the receiver box cover. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls out there. As if it wasn't expected, we did have some more camera issues. And I didn't discover this until editing, and we are editing right now. I'm right in the middle of editing. And I discovered a missing section of videotape, a part along the line where the camera stopped recording, and that was the installation of our receiver box cover and plugging our ESC in, plugging our steering servo in, as well as getting our steering servo horn attached to the servo itself. So you missed me installing our servo wires, you missed the little bit of silicone going across the gasket for reinstalling all this nonsense. I apologize for that. It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. Your steering servo goes into channel number 1. There's 2 channel 1s, channel 1 and then channel 1 again, and then channel 2, and so on and so forth. Steering servo goes into the first channel 1, and then you leave the second channel 1 open and plug your ESC into channel 2. And that'll have it all hooked up back to the way it was. So you missed the wires being ran, you missed the silicone being put in place, you missed the lid being put on, and you missed the steering servo horn being put back into place. But we have all that stuff done, and I figure we'll just take the camera off the tripod here and get a peek at all this nonsense so we can see it all up close and personal. Looking at our wires, motor wires once again ran neatly down the side. Our little clamp here is slightly clocked in the 11 o'clock position, kind of sitting in the crater of that little honeycomb right there. Motor wires are not hitting the ESC fan, so this is sitting above the ESC fan, so we have clearance there, so our wires aren't hitting. Our ESC is being plugged into channel 2 once again, the steering servo being plugged into the first channel 1. Our wires are all nice and neat. We have our excess wire tucked inside the receiver box up here. We put a thin layer of silicone down across the base of that foam before we set the wires in, and another layer across the top before we put the lid back on. So it had a small layer across the bottom and a small layer across the top of grease just so we could seal out the elements. And then we have that clamped down. So we're all good to go there. A little bit of dust. Yes, we test drove it, and you guys missed that too, but it's it'll be on the video, so you'll see that in a few minutes. Our servo horn has been installed, relatively easy. Once again, we centered that steering servo, so we made sure that that was all nice and straight. Then we just centered our wheels as best we could. Slipped our servo horn onto the servo, and then installed that M3 screw back into the bottom and tighten it up a little bit. So there we go on that. Alright, let's continue. Just wanted to show you guys what we missed. We missed the install of our wires, getting our servo hooked up, getting our ESC hooked up, and getting our servo horn put back into place. Alright, we are all finished up. We got our servo horn tightened back down, reassembled. Everything seems to be good to go. We're going to put a battery in this guy real quick just to make sure that everything is still centered on our steering servo. Wherever I put the battery at, I know I left that 3S battery around here or somewhere else. I put it away. That doesn't happen too often. Or I actually put something away. That's right, getting our 3S battery kind of laid back in here again. Granny drive shaft installed. ESC is plugged in. Get our battery hold down in place wherever I left that little guy at. This guy here. We've got the wires kind of ran here. That's how we run it on my brother's slash, but it fits, but man, that is tight. It is a tight fit. Alright, so we got all that hooked up. Radio's on. ESC is on. Our steering's not too bad all in all. We're not too far out of whack. Maybe just a little bit right of center. But not by much. We only had to turn the trim back very little. Just a little bit left of center. And everything seems to be working okay. Including our hot racing fan. Works great. Alright, so there we go, boys and girls. We got everything all installed on the Traxxas Slash. We've got a low center of gravity chassis kit installed. Brand new drive shaft installed. We've got our drive shaft slightly elevated now. So no real worries about getting rocks and stuff jammed up underneath there. Bringing things to a halt. Servo's been repositioned for our steering servo. Receiver's been repositioned. ESC's been repositioned. Motor's been repositioned. Everything's pretty much repositioned on this one. Battery's sitting down lower inside the chassis. Everything's sitting lower inside the chassis. Our bell cranks on the steering system are recessed now into the chassis. We have that nice skid plate covering the steering mechanism, so the bell cranks and all that other good nonsense are nice and protected. And I kind of like that. That's cool. Didn't necessarily like the way they were sitting on the other Slash chassis where everything's kind of exposed on the bottom. Especially up here in the northern woods. Lots of sticks and roots and other little things that you get snagged on. I mean, downstate, if I was out in a skate park or something, it'd be a different story. But in this current environment where we're at, this low center of gravity chassis, once again, works out much better. Don't have to worry about rocks getting jammed up underneath there. And we don't have to worry about sticks and other crap getting caught up underneath on the steering linkage. So having that all recessed like it is a much better way to go. Alright, let's slap a body on this guy, take it for a test fly real quick, and call it a done deal. Alright, mid-evening here. Still daylight outside, but it's getting darker here. And later, let's take it for a test run and see how everything works out. See if everything works out okay. ESC fan's on, that's a good sign. Steering works, that's a good sign. I'm going to be driving one-handed here, so forgive me, it's a little bit of a reach here to get to that steering wheel. Try not to hit anything. We just want to make sure that everything works out okay. Seems to be working pretty good to me. Yep, looks like it's working good to me. Not going to abuse it, driving one-handed. Cars and stuff in the driveway. Don't need to be taking anything out. So it's working. Working good. And there we go, boys and girls. That is going to do it on this video. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. Our standard chassis VXL to low center of gravity chassis conversion kit was a success. And she is 100% complete and good to go. As always, questions and comments are always welcome. And we will see you all on the next video. Thanks again.